across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. Not just that the police have arrived at the Sandringham estate where Prince Andrew, as was now Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, is currently living since being thrown out of the Windsor estate. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation and development on this story involving the Epstein files and all the allegations that have been swirling around about Andrew over the many years, from Virginia Giuffre, now sadly deceased, and since then, and certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files as released in the last few weeks. But the police have arrived at Sandringham estate this morning, where Andrew has made his new home. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is. He has been arrested by the police. Of course, the brother of the current king, the second son of our late Queen Elizabeth. This is an extraordinary development. Those of us who've been talking an awful lot about establishment cover-ups and lack of, should we say, interest by the police in what are very, very serious allegations against Andrew. Perhaps pleased that that pressure has finally been put on the police, and they have done the job of actually looking into these issues seriously. Must bear in mind, of course, that the Prince has not been charged with any crime at this point, and he has always denied any wrongdoing in relation to any of the allegations about him. We'll give you more on that. We'll talk to you about that throughout the show, but I'm just being told that the arrest has been on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This, of course, relates to those Epstein file allegations and the documents that, if they are true, would suggest that he had, it is alleged, passed on basically what was confidential government information when he was the UK trade envoy for this country for 10 years to Jeffrey Epstein for Jeffrey Epstein's financial gain. Right, we're also going to be talking, of course, about, the American president and his fresh attack on Keir Starmer's Chagos Islands deal. Seems to change his mind with a wind on this, but also the defence chiefs who've warned that Britain must face a 1936 moment, and that Keir Starmer must not just increase defence spending, but double it, and do so now. And we'll discuss the grooming gangs crisis in the capital city, one which, of course, was denied by the London mayor until last year. All of that coming up, so much more besides. Love to hear your thoughts on all of those stories. The number to call is 0344 499 1000. Get in touch and text the word TALK and your message to 87222. You can also get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text cost £1, standard network rate message. Joining us throughout the show later today will be Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. But I'm delighted to say in the studio, planned before quite a lot of this breaking news, I have to say, we've got Robert Jenrick, MP, reforms UK's shadow chancellor, although really Treasury spokesman is perhaps the more constitutionally accurate
Why are you in the Tories' pocket, Julia?
It's in the Tories' pocket. We laughed at the Lib Dems when they did it. We're going to laugh at you when you did it.
They weren't ahead in the opinion polls, were they? 200 times in a row.
This is a very fair point, but very big welcome to the studio.
Nice to see you too, Thanks for having me.
I don't think we were planning to talk about Andrew being arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office, but of course this is now the lead story. I must ask you, you want to be a Minister of the Crown. You've been a Minister of the Crown. What do you make of the police arriving and arresting the King's brother?
Well, look, nobody is above the law in this country, and so it's absolutely right that the police follow the evidence and take the actions that they need to. The crimes that have been alleged to have happened, whether it's with respect to the victims, with Jeffrey Epstein, or passing confidential government papers to a convicted sex offender, are very serious, and the police need to do whatever is necessary to follow the evidence and take the action that they need. But we don't know all the facts at the moment, but no doubt we'll learn more in the hours to come.
Are you concerned, and a lot of us have been talking about this for quite some time, it's something that our audience is concerned about, that there has actually been an establishment cover-up for many years? When there was the allegations from Virginia Giuffre all those years ago, there was no investigation by the police. £12 million was paid in a settlement of a civil case. but apparently funded by the late Queen and the current King in large part. And yet the police still didn't think it was worth any sort of investigation. Numerous things that Prince Andrew said in that interview for Newsnight with Emily Maitlis were turned out to be simply not, at the very least, not verifiable. And apparently no interest taken in, for instance, talking to his close protection officers and asking for evidence from them about where he had been and what he had done and what might have happened. Do you not think that there is an issue that actually this has been a long time coming? Again, innocent until proven guilty, no charges brought. We do need to stress that. We
don't know we don't know all the details yet.
But the police would investigate someone for a hurty tweet on far less evidence.
You're right to say, look at some of the ludicrous things that we see being investigated by the police. Like, didn't police turn up to the door of a mum because she'd put something on a school WhatsApp group that was mildly disparaging about teachers? I mean, Alison Pearson, journalist, to get the police knocking on their door. These allegations have been in the public domain for a very long time. I think you're right to raise questions about why it's taken so long for this to come to a head. But let's wait and see what happens now.
Okay.
But the main point is, we live in a country in which absolutely nobody, however exalted, should be above the law, and that's right that the police are taking this seriously now.
Let's talk about what we should also take seriously is when the leader of the free world, when the leader of our greatest ally, and particularly our military and defence greatest ally, in Donald Trump, the American president, says that the Prime Minister's Chagos deal is absolutely awful, and it should be got rid of. He's been said very, very clearly in a post on his social media page that Starbucks should not give away the Diego Garcia, the military base on the Chagos Islands. And they said it simply should not go ahead, and that he was making a big mistake by entering into a 100-year lease with Mauritius to basically lease back a base which we already own.
Well, the Prime Minister himself said that the deal would not go ahead if it didn't have the support of the United States. It now does not have the support of the United States. The President himself, in his own words, has taken to social media to denounce the deal in the strongest possible terms. But I would say, Julia, I'm not really interested in what Donald Trump has to say on this. I care about British interests, and this is a bad deal irrespective of what Donald Trump thinks about it. Why would the United Kingdom give away our own sovereign territory to another country who's never really had a claim to this, which is hundreds and hundreds of miles away from it, and pay billions of pounds for the privilege to an ally of China? This is a completely mad deal. The people behind this have, what are their motives? Well, we don't know, do we? But it seems to be this group of North London lawyers, Keir Starmer, Lord Hermer, Philippe Sands, this human rights lawyer who went to the Chagos Islands and planted the flag of another country there. People who in a different era would have been, described as traitors to the United Kingdom. They are people who have driven this because of an ideology which is all about putting international law above the basic security interests of the United Kingdom. The whole thing has fallen apart now. It's a total farce, and it needs to be the next U-turn of Keir Starmer.
It would actually be a U-turn we'd welcome. Some of them we have welcomed.
Well, we've welcomed a lot of them, to be honest.
But this thing,
this should never have got to this point.
There's no moral case, no legal case, no military case, no diplomatic case. The only thing, a lot of people are saying, do we need to follow the money on this? Is someone just benefiting
I don't
from
know,
this
but what I have said is that when this farce is over, and let's hope that it's a U-turn in the coming weeks, there should be a proper inquiry as to how we got to this point. Because, as you say, it was a non-binding legal judgment, so there's no legal argument for doing this. There's no defence or security argument. We want this base. It's one of the most important bases that we in the United States have anywhere in the world. Why would you compromise it? There are moral arguments here about the Chagosians who were forcibly removed in the 1960s and now aren't allowed to go back, although some have rather boldly stepped foot there again. So what is behind this? And the ministers and officials, frankly, in the last Conservative government and this Labour government, who have driven this process over the last few years, should be held to account.
Well, indeed. I mean, what do you make of the Chagos Islanders returning and saying we're coming back, and then a British gunboat turning up, delivering legal papers, telling them they'll be arrested if they don't leave? A lot of people will be saying, why can we do that on the other side of the world in the Indian Ocean, but we can't do it in the Channel?
Well,
with people arriving on our shores.
What a parable about broken Britain, that you've got illegal migrants turning up here being put in 4-star hotels, and human rights laws mean supposedly we can't send them back home. And then British citizens, including people who are Chagosians, by birth or second generation, are being within hours of arriving, served with papers and told to leave. And it's even worse than that, Julia. A group of illegal migrants went by a small boat to Diego Garcia years ago and have been, housed, given medical treatment, schooling, blah, 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 for years on Diego Garcia. The British state has completely failed to remove them, despite the fact they probably are a threat to security because they're in the defence part of the archipelago. This group of people step foot, and within 24 hours, suddenly the British state has swung into action and is able to try and remove them.
Nice to know we can do it if we really had the will.
Exactly, but the priorities of this government and the state are completely wrong.
Well, let's talk about priorities, because at the end of the day, the Chagos deal is not for most of us fundamentally about the right of return for the Chagosians. I'm afraid it isn't. It's about our own ability to defend ourselves and the significance of the Diego Garcia base. When it comes to defence, we've got a letter sent to the government from numerous senior figures, former defence chief, former defence secretaries and others, basically saying we don't just need to up our defence spending from 2.3% to 2.5% or 3% sometime in the next decade. It needs to be doubled to 5%, and it needs to happen now. We are in 1936 territory. I would argue we're actually in 1938 territory, but let's let a couple of years go at that point. If you were Chancellor, the job you want to do, the job that you're being lined up to do if and when there is an election and Reform win, would you up defence spending to 5%, and how would you fund that? Well,
we do want to invest more in our armed forces. In fact, at the last general election, Reform made the biggest commitment, which was to increase defence spending over time to 3.5%. So it was the first political party to go beyond what was then the consensus. I don't disagree with anything that the generals have said today. Our armed forces are in a parlous state. I mean, look at our nuclear deterrent Trident, which is, it's up for question whether it even works. The tests that were done recently failed. We've got less than 8 days of munitions left in this country if we were to go to war. The big question is, how do you fund these increases? And if we're going to get anywhere near that, we've got to cut public spending, particularly the welfare budget. And that's what I said yesterday in a speech in London, that Reform is not going to be a party of welfare. We're going to bring forward the most comprehensive plan to reduce the benefits bill. And only by doing that, we'll be able to start to think about investing more in our armed forces or cutting bills for people as soon as we can. OK, so you wouldn't be able to do it immediately? It's not going to be able to happen immediately, no. But we may have no choice by 2029. It's only possible if we can get the welfare bill down and manage the public finance in a responsible way. Thankfully, you seem to have helped steer Nigel Farage to a bit more sense on the two-child benefit cap, copying a Tory policy. They've brought it in, and a policy from Kemi Badenoch, your old boss as Tory leader, to reinstate it. But you seem to be in a bit of a battle over the triple lock for pensioners. Yesterday, you confirmed that you did support the triple lock for pensioners, which means a minimum of 2.5% increase in pensions, regardless of inflation and wage growth, and often much higher than that, than 2.5%. Your boss, Nigel Farage, now says that actually the triple lock is still up for debate. Which is it? No, what we said is, I've always supported it. We believe that pensioners in the last decades of their life should be given security and dignity on fixed incomes, and look how tough it is right now out there with energy bills and food bills going up all the time. It's tougher for a lot of young people right now. Absolutely. But we're going to take this in a deliberative way. Reform is not going to just make big tax and spend commitments without thinking it through very carefully. But that's a massive tax and spend commitment. It is. Well, precisely. That's why we've said we're going to give it some further thought, and we're going to return to this in due course and make our views known. But so it's absolutely not confirmed. It is still up for debate. Well, we're going to think about it carefully, yes, because that's the way we're going to proceed as a party. We want to build trust that we could be good guardians of the public finances. We want to win the next general election and manage the public finances better, frankly, than they have been either with the Tories under Liz Truss or now under Rachel Reeves and Labour. And so it's right on the big questions like this that we give it careful thought. We're going to return to it soon, but pensioners should know we are going to have their backs. We understand how difficult life is out there. But you also know that you'll have pensioners' backs at the cost of younger people who are struggling. And yes, we know a lot of pensioners are also on low incomes, but we also know that a lot of pensioners who are much better off than much younger people on average. Absolutely. They own their own homes. And that's a pipe dream for many younger people. These are very tough choices, and we understand the trade-offs that are inherent in managing the economy responsibly. And that's one of the messages I set out yesterday, that we will take great care with people's money. We'll manage it as if it was our own, because we want to make sure that we don't get into the trap that previous governments have done, which is making these commitments, they then fall apart, the endless U-turns that you're seeing with this Labour government.
Okay. Well, a lot of the commitments from reform could actually be found from the decision to scrap net zero, which is costing the country many billions, and many companies and individuals. That would certainly be very welcome to me. I remember discussing this with you before when you were first running for the Tory leadership. It feels like a lifetime ago. You were in favour of net zero. We had a row about it. By the end of the leadership campaign, you were against it.
That's not true.
Is there
Julia.
anything you stand by?
That's not true, Julia. I was in fact the first person to say that I disagreed with net zero. The question you asked me was whether at that stage we should scrap altogether the 2050 target. And I said to you, I thought it was unrealistic. We were never going to meet it as a country, and we need to think through what the answer to that was. I was the first person to say that. And in fact, when I stood for the leadership, you know what? Tons of people in the Tory party said to me, I can't vote for you, Rob, because we're wedded to net zero, just as they said I can't vote for you because we're wedded to the ECHR, or when I said we wanted to scrap the international aid budget and spend it on defence. So excuse me if I'm a bit sceptical about the Tory party changing tune. And on reforms policy, who was a lone voice about net zero? Well, you were raising this, but Richard Tice was one of the first senior politicians in British politics to be talking about this, as was Nigel Farage. So people can trust reform, that we've been well ahead of the curve on this when it was fashionable under Theresa May and Boris Johnson to talk about this, to pretend there were going to be hundreds of thousands of green jobs out there. People's bills weren't going to rise. Reform was there well before everybody else. And the reason we care about this is we want to get people's bills down, whether that's companies, so we stop deindustrialising, losing all the factories across the country, and households as well, because people are suffering as a result of this. And by getting energy prices down, we're going to really help the cost of living and affordability.
We started at the beginning of the show talking about Prince Andrew, who has been arrested by Thames Valley Police. They've issued a statement now. He's been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He is in police custody at this time. Imagine a scenario where the police say, we have today arrested a man in his 60s from Norfolk. So it's just quite extraordinary that news. But let's bring it back to another set of crimes where we have also seen people. Well, let's face it. A lot of people say, why has action taken so long? Why is it not being forthcoming? And that is over grooming gangs across the country. A year ago, Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, said there was no indication of grooming gangs in London at the time. I thought a lot of us saying, well, it's rather bizarre if it's happening in 55 different towns and cities where it's been identified as being a massive issue, with thousands upon thousands of girls over 2 decades being horrifically abused, groomed and raped. We now have a BBC investigation, so therefore it's okay to talk about it, saying vulnerable women and girls as young as 14 have been lured into a world of forced sex by gangs in London. Apparently, they say from many different ethnic and religious backgrounds, including white people. What a surprise! But what do you make of this? When the police say, look, this has been going on, the campaigners say it's been going on, the women and the girls have been saying it's been going on. We've got this BBC investigation, but the London mayor apparently didn't think it was happening.
It's shameful, isn't it? It was obvious that this problem existed in London. If it was existing in places as varied as High Wycombe, Aylesbury, Telford, Bradford, it was obviously happening in London. And yet, not just Sadiq Khan, but also the Commissioner of the Met Police didn't take this seriously, were complacent, or worse, tried to conceal this was happening. And I think in Sadiq Khan's case, it was probably the latter, because he was worried about perceptions of him amongst some of the people who vote for him, the communities that have supported him, and that's completely wrong. We now need to have a proper investigation in London. The mayor has to help to drive that. We know that if Layla Cunningham, the Reform candidate, was the mayor, she would do this. She's made it one of her most prominent commitments. And we've got to get the government to get off their backside and get this national inquiry with the full statutory powers up and running. Where is that? It is going nowhere. We've got to get answers, because every day that we go without answers, there are probably young girls who could be my children or yours, who are out there being abused in the most heinous way by men, and we've got to stop this.
The reality is, we know that if it was our daughters, it would have been stopped. That's the reality.
Yeah, well, because these were working class. These are working class white girls, and the community, the police, felt that they were dispendable as a result.
Robert Jenrick, it's been great to have you in the studio. Thank you very much for a lot of breaking news there. Reform UK's Shadow Chancellor, Treasury spokesman, whichever you wish to choose. Robert Jenrick, thank you very much for joining us. Do stay for a moment. 10:22 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your reaction to what Robert Jenrick's had to say on all those big topics. The news that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been arrested and by the police and is now in police custody on charges of misconduct in public office. And also love to hear your thoughts on what Donald Trump has had to say about the Chagos Islands, defence spending up to 5%. Would you support that? But where's the money coming from it? Your thoughts on all of those topics. Get in touch. The phone lines are open. 0344 499 1000. Up next, we'll be talking to Henry Hill from Conservative Home, but also we're going to be talking to Di Davis, former head of Royal Protection with the police, and find out what he makes of the news of Andrew's arrest. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:25 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. If you are just tuning in, extraordinary breaking news in the last half hour or so. Thames Valley Police officers arrived at the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, where Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, has now made his home. They've been searching that property in Norfolk, also property in Berkshire, and they've issued a statement. They have arrested a man in his 60s from Norfolk on suspicion of misconduct in public office, and the man remains in police custody at this time. They say we will not be naming the arrested man as per national guidance. They point out this case is now active, so we should take care not to basically be in breach of contempt of court and in any way damage any possible proceedings if they do go ahead. But it is very clear that it is Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor who, on his 66th birthday today, has been arrested and taken into custody by Thames Valley Police on those allegations, particularly those involved in the Epstein files, which were about the allegations of misconduct in public office coming from, which were all about if these files are true, and remember that Andrew has, on behalf of, spokespeople on his behalf, has denied any wrongdoing, that information that was given to Andrew purely as a UK trade envoy, confidential information that could be very useful outside the government, that information was given to him in these Epstein files, and it does appear sometimes within minutes or hours sent over to Jeffrey Epstein, at that point a convicted paedophile, his friend, financier, which would be a misconduct in public office. Well, Henry Hill joins us now as Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. We know this is an ongoing story, Henry, and I think a lot of people, including me, have been rather angry at the fact that the police seem to be taking their sodding time investigating what are very serious allegations against such senior figures as, the brother of the king, the son of the late Queen. But action now has been taken. We need to stress he's not been charged with a crime. We need to stress he said he's not guilty of any wrongdoing. But this is an extraordinary development.
Oh no, absolutely. And I think this really highlights how difficult it can be for the police in a high-profile case like this, because, there's lots of police forces involved here. It's not one monolithic national. There's at least 9 forces, I think, involved in looking at.
Is it 9 forces?
I think there are 9 different
7
forces.
at the last. No, you're right. I think it is 9.
I think it is 9. Looking at this, so I wonder which one it is that's made the first move. But then, on the other hand, you see them. I think it's his birthday today, isn't it? When they've decided to swoop in, and. As interesting as that is as a journalist, I think there is a little bit of me as a citizen that thinks, well, this is the police making sort of an obvious bit of a PR move here, I think, on the timing, which is slightly sobering. But I think, as you say, this is a live investigation, and so we're limited in how much we can really speculate about it. But when you think about how long this story has been rolling on, any hope that it would fizzle or fade away is now obviously completely for the bird.
Well, indeed. And I think that a lot of people may be interested, and again, there are different allegations that are being investigated by different police forces. And again, Andrew's denied wrongdoing in all cases. However, the fact that it was, many years ago when Virginia Giuffre first made the allegation that she had been trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein to have sex with Andrew, he denied having ever met her, and then bizarrely paid £12 million to her and for legal fees, mostly funded by the late Queen and by the current King, his brother, just a few years ago, to settle a civil case. But at no point it emerged had the police ever even bothered to question Andrew. Now, given what the police do spend their time bothering with, apparently not, people being burgled or mobile phones stolen or the like, but they seem to bother certainly with the odd hurty tweet here and there. A lot of us find it extraordinary that someone who had faced such a serious allegation, although of course she was a minor in some jurisdictions in Florida as a 17-year-old, Virginia Giuffre was not a minor in this country, but given the seriousness of the allegations involving Andrew, and given that this is a man who was surrounded at all times by close protection officers who could verify where he was or where he wasn't at any time, or was he in a Pizza Express in Woking, or was he in a nightclub dancing with a woman who claims he's never met, that would have been so much more easy to verify than most of us who'd be racking our brains about where we were on any given evening or checking old diaries. There are formal records. A lot of us, I think, found it a bit bizarre that it took so long. And interestingly, of course, the arrest in this case is over the allegations contained in the Epstein files involving giving away, the allegation is giving away basically government confidential information, not the possible abuse of trafficked young women.
Yeah, that is an important thing to stress.
Which perhaps most of us might care more about.
Well, it also, but it does mean, if you're interested in sort of the minutiae of this, that I think misconduct in public office is one of those very strange common law offences, which means it actually has no maximum sentence.
Yeah, it would be life.
So yeah, you could theoretically send him.
But it does involve deliberately believing that this would benefit someone else. There's quite a high threshold. Yes, but it's
entirely judge-made because we've never put it in statute. But I think you're right. I think that it is important to stress that these are completely different allegations, and I suspect one of the reasons that they've been taken forward. Obviously, the British police do not have an amazing track record of taking allegations of sexual abuse seriously. Yep. But if we are to put the case for the police a little bit who aren't here we have a massive documentary tranche of evidence about something, whereas with the Virginia Giuffre stuff, one, she did accept a civil suit which involved non-admission of guilt, right? She didn't have to do that.
Which is the normal reason why.
But also, if you look at if you were a police officer and you had to go only on the contents of that book, several other of those stories have fallen to pieces under scrutiny. There is evidence that the book was previously being shopped around in a slightly different form, and so you can see why you might not want to have a system where a series of potentially sensationalist allegations are not sufficient grounds for raking an individual through public life. Now, of course, it's not just the Giuffre stuff, because the Epstein network has been known about for some time, and I think that we should definitely have seen action before this Nonetheless, better late than never.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people will be saying that. Again, we'll keep you up to date on the developments on this. But look, there are other stories in the news, of course. And what did you make of Donald Trump putting his tuppence worth in? This is a bit of a hokey-cokey on the Chagos issue, because he's basically, on his Truth Social site, he has demanded that Keir Starmer not give away Diego Garcia, the military base on the Chagos Islands, when we hand them over to Mauritius. It's still going through Parliament, this. It hasn't actually gone through yet. Warning the Prime Minister he was making a big mistake by entering into 100-year lease with Mauritius. He had previously called the move an act of great stupidity, and then he had approved it. We have the State Department only days ago saying they support this move. The White House seemingly not. It does appear that Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, who's on the show a bit later, has been in White House and has perhaps met with some quite senior figures and helped to push the case for why this is a very, very bad idea for our security to give away Diego Garcia, Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia. But how significant do you think this intervention is? And Keir Starmer saying they wouldn't do it if the White House didn't approve. If the White House doesn't approve, does this kibosh the whole idea? Well,
Starmer now seems to be saying that he'll push ahead anyway. I mean, it's strange, isn't it? His whole government is falling to pieces around him. It's a bit like the scene in the Jungle Book when the whole city's collapsing. And the one thing that he's focused on, if there's one thing he does as Prime Minister, he's going to give away the Chagos Islands for some reason. I mean, the whole thing is mad. It was originally a result of US pressure, right? There's no actual legal case for having to give them up. But essentially it was, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned the State Department, it was America under Biden and Trump essentially wanting to placate India. Reflexive anti-colonial stuff. Yeah. And the State Department, of course, will really love this deal. Now, I suspect that what's happened, given the other story which we might get to about the potential for a US strike on Iran, is that, as well as Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, some US generals have probably been pointing out in some very pointed briefings quite how essential Diego Garcia is to America's ability to project air power in the Middle East.
And we know it's been used in only recent years.
Right. And if you did hand the islands over to Mauritius, amongst all of the many other problems, Mauritius is actually party to, amongst other things, an anti-nuclear treaty, which means it's no longer obvious whether we or America could base nuclear.
I mean, the whole thing is an utter disaster. It is absolutely mad, and I'm sorry, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, which makes me question whether there's money behind this. Genuinely, I just always, if there's no moral, legal, diplomatic, security basis for this decision, let's follow the chain of the money. That seems to be the answer.
I didn't have you down as such an optimist.
I know, exactly. Just before we go to a break, you mentioned the possibility of strikes threats on Iran. This is a possibility. We know they've got ongoing negotiations over this. I mean, we've got negotiations on virtually every. There's Gaza, there's the border peace. We've got negotiations on Iran. We've got negotiations on Ukraine, and nothing seems to be going terribly well. But there's talk that there could be these strikes within days.
Yeah, the question is to what end, right? Israel has already shown that Iranian airspace can be penetrated essentially at will. That's not in dispute. But the question is, what are you going to do? There's no suggestion, as far as I can see, of any ground invasion. No. And so what comes of it?
We shall see. 10:35 is the time. Love to hear your responses to all the stories today. In particular, of course, the arrest of Andrew, the brother of the King, the son of the late Queen Elizabeth, on charges of misconduct in public office. Of course, he's not facing a charge right now, and he has proclaimed himself to be innocent on all allegations against him. But we're going to be talking about that with the former head of Royal Protection, Dara Davies, up next. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss a thing. This is Talk. Good morning, welcome back. 10:37 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Well, obviously, we're going to be talking now more about that breaking news this morning in the last hour. The news that Thames Valley Police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, on over misconduct in public office charges. We're going to be talking about that right now with Di Davies, former head of Royal Protection. Good morning to you, Di.
Good morning,
Julia.
Nice to be back with you again.
Well, I mean, again, extraordinary circumstances. It's the former prince's 66th birthday. He's lost his HRH, he's lost his prince, he's lost his dukedom, lost all his titles, lost his big fancy house in Royal Lodge in Windsor, banished to the Sandringham estate, and now the indignity of police arriving at the estate on his birthday to search both his property in Norfolk and we believe the old property in Berkshire as well. And he has been arrested. He is in police custody at this time. Well, the police will say only a man in his 60s, but it's very clear from the footage of those on the scene that this is where they've been. What was your first reaction when you heard that he had actually been arrested?
Well, at long last, is my reaction. I've been calling out for this, frankly, for nearly 6 years, ever since the allegation emerged back in 2015. Now, I know there's a lot of evidence that has to be gone through, and he hasn't been arrested, as I understand it, for sexual offences,
exactly.
But malfeasance in public office. But that appeared clear to me when we got to hear about the fact that he allegedly had asked his deputy press secretary to make inquiries into Virginia. That could, in my opinion, amount to malfeasance in public office.
The term is misconduct in public office. Well, that's the interesting thing, that the allegations that we've been discussing against Prince Andrew, again, which he's always denied, he's never been charged with any crime, or not until this point ever been spoken to by the police, as far as we understand, about any alleged crime, that it's always been concerning Virginia Giuffre, the concerns about his relationship with a convicted paedophile in Jeffrey Epstein, and whether or not that he was part of the mistreatment and abuse and of these young girls and young women. Now, he's always, I must keep stressing, he has denied any wrongdoing, but what's emerged in the Epstein files in the last couple of weeks about with documents, again, if they are valid documents, if they are true, of documents being given to Andrew when he was UK trade envoy, acting, as the official trade envoy for this country, being paid, the Queen paid him a stipend, he had huge expenses for that role, doing that role for his mother's own government. If those documents are true, it appears he has handed over documents that are confidential to his big mate, convicted paedophile financier, which would have made them money. That goes much further. But do you think it's quite telling that he's been arrested on charges involving those allegations, it would appear, rather than the stuff we were discussing, the Newsnight interview and the stuff that's been on the front pages for how many years, and is the reason why he actually originally lost his HRH title?
Well, I think this is the beginning. And with any case, you've got to start with what appears to be either obvious or is there in front of you. This is just the start, I would imagine. And again, as you rightly say, he hasn't been found guilty. At this stage, it's quite right that the police, Thames Valley in this case, have gone all the way to Norfolk to arrest him on issues regarding misconduct. But misconduct can have a huge variance in what that alleged misconduct is. So without a doubt, they will be probing that. And as I understand it now, there obviously are 9 different police forces throughout the country that will have to be coordinated into a structure. So I'd almost put what they call a gold, silver and bronze. So in other words, you have somebody who says, right, this is what we're looking at, this is how we're going to do it, and then you delegated that to a senior detective to actually coordinate the 9 different forces and the various allegations going forward. It is a complex scenario, but I think we're at the very early stages of this investigation. But it's a high time. But the consequence, not only for Andrew, but for his family and also his brother, the king, and the whole royal family, is quite enormous. I've said before, I can't think in my lifetime, and that's quite a long time, of anything quite as serious. It's more serious than when Edward VIII was giving information to the Germans, in one sense, because it's today and it's dealing with today's issues, including his misconduct, as far as I can see, in respect of who he was giving that information to, who he was dealing with, and who in turn they were dealing with, either for the Chinese, for the Russians, to the Israelis. I mean, it's just a Pandora's box, as I keep saying.
Indeed, and there's no circumstance, again, if these documents are genuine, if these emails are genuine, there's just no circumstance in which that would ever be something you would have even a matter of doubt on, working in that role, whether or not you could forward that information. And again, really, we'll have to wait and see how this develops. You talked about the consequences of the family, and it's something you've discussed with me a number of times since the Epstein files were published, and something also we discussed with Andrew Lowney, and I know you work closely with him on his book, and he's been very forthcoming that he believes this could even be the end of the monarchy. This could lead to King Charles having to stand down. There'll be a lot of people who are very, very wary of tainting the late Queen Elizabeth's name, but there's a lot of concern that she helped this huge payoff to Virginia Giuffre in the civil case. There's 12 million quid. Presumably that was money for her, and also legal fees and the like. King Charles also, then Prince of Wales, also contributed, I think, $1.5 million to that. Other family members as well, extraordinarily. A loan apparently, but that's never been paid back by Andrew. There are big question marks, as we've discussed a number of times, but for listeners who happen to have missed our conversations, the idea that Andrew was, travelling, seeing Jeffrey Epstein, working, as a UK trade envoy, doing what he's doing, spending time on, the Jeffrey Epstein's island, in his home in New York, inviting him to Buckingham Palace, and the idea that the royal protection officers, the idea that senior Buckingham Palace staff, and even, frankly, even the most senior royals were not aware of certainly the allegations and concerns is for the stars, isn't it? There's no question at all. They would have known.
Well, I think so, and I think I've said it on your program and others. Stop taking us for fools, frankly.
Yeah.
It's just inconceivable that if you agree to pay out 12 million to a female you've never allegedly met, and in those early days, these serious allegations were not quite there. Yes, there were allegations that he was, after he'd been convicted, that's Epstein, paedophile. Well, that's one thing. Now we have these incredibly serious aspects, and questions have to be asked in the palace. Who knew? Who briefed? Because every day when I was in post, I had a cutting of every media that came in that affected the royal family, and they would have the same.
Yeah.
So quite clearly, from early on when these allegations were made, senior palace officials would have known. And I allege, and I take no pleasure, but as an investigator, I allege senior officials must have briefed senior royals as to the consequence. And they've hoped that by doing what they did in paying her off, that would kill it dead. Unfortunately, all it's done is raise the mantle further. Yeah. Now, I would imagine that Thames Valley Police and the Metropolitan Police must, through the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, have been in touch with the authorities in the United States. They must have more positive evidence. They said they've been assessing. They've had nearly a fortnight to assess. I think they've been working 24/7 on this because it is so serious. Yes. And as Andrew Lowney says, there are consequences for King Charles if it can be shown either he or his private secretaries throughout this period were aware and advised certain actions or not. Then there would be consequences. And it's a sad indictment. But as we say, we are in uncharted waters. And if there is any evidence that he knew or he took part in any kind of deception or any other aspect, then clearly it would be an abdication matter as far as I'm concerned. And again, I've never thought in all my years again I'd be saying that.
I mean, there's no doubt at all that Charles and the Prince of Wales, Prince William, have long wanted Andrew to disappear from the family. That's been made really, really clear from not just palace briefings, but also from, should we say, Charles's quick actions once he was on the throne and able to take that action. But your view is that he may not have acted soon enough, and what he did, you believe, to help. Well, at the very least, not to expose this, if not to cover it up, we don't know yet, will, at the end of the day, be an abdication matter?
Well, I said yesterday on a programme, it's a conspiracy of silence. And if you can show that silence was motivated by an attempt to deceive, then clearly there are consequences or concern. I can't say it more stronger than that. I don't have evidence of that. But as an investigator, if I was investigating, I wouldn't stop at the lower levels. I'd go all the way up.
Indeed. And just finally, Di Davies, I mean, you say, a conspiracy of silence. Do you trust now that the police, obviously egged on, the public demand, the King saying, we will cooperate with anything, any investigations and the like, and then I suppose pressure from the media and other politicians as well. Do you trust that there won't be another establishment cover-up? We will get to the bottom of this, and we will know exactly who knew what when and who did what when?
When you have the Prime Minister going on BBC saying nobody is above the law, I suspect he's had private briefings. I'd be surprised if he hadn't, because the consequences to the country are enormous worldwide. And my phone hasn't stopped this morning from people all over the world asking to speak to me on my view. My view is pretty much like yours. Where's common sense? Let common sense apply, and let the law apply to anyone who has either tried or has concealed information. It's called conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. That's my other saying this morning, conspiracy of silence. And then if it can be proved, if there was a conspiracy by others to hide his alleged dreadful deeds, then take the consequence.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Very, very harsh words there from Di Davies, former head of Royal Protection. Later in the show, we're going to be talking to Dickie Arbiter. He's former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth. We're also going to be talking to Charles Ray. He's the former royal editor of The Sun. I mean, these people have very close access to royal family and to their, protection officers. And I think over the years we'll get their thoughts. I'll just come back to you very briefly. First, to you, Henry Hill, from Conservative Home. I mean, do we trust that any investigation will go all the way and will expose anyone and everyone, no matter how senior they are in the royal family, if any wrongdoing? And again, it's a big if any wrongdoing has taken place?
Yeah, it's important to stress that it is a very big if. I mean, I personally don't think that we still live in a Britain where the police would stop a criminal investigation like this at the behest of the monarch, because even if the instruction...
I don't think it happens that explicitly.
Well, yeah, but even if the instruction were given, there's now such a spotlight on them. How would it even happen? How would somebody justify it? These kind of things, if they did happen, they work when there's little bits of the operation that no one's paying attention to. Something gets left in a drawer. That's not going to happen now. Absolutely not.
Well, again, do you think it's in Britain's interest for us to get more of it? You could, people might say, well, we don't want this, we don't want the damage to our monarchy as representing our country. A lot of people might argue that.
If the King has somehow had proof or knowledge that Andrew was guilty and covered it up, then sure, that is something that we should absolutely investigate, because he's not fit for the throne. But if it's merely, defending his brother, paying off a single allegation, that is, however much it might look now, that is normal PR practice, and I think that's a different matter.
OK, very interesting. Thank you very much. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much, Dean. It's also the home of your phone calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch to have your say. And I know a lot of you are wanting to have your say on Andrew. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been arrested at Sandringham. He has been arrested on charges of misconduct in public office. He has, of course, denied all wrongdoing. He has not actually been charged with any crimes. We always remember that in our conversations. But you want to have your say, and 0344 499 1000 is the way to do it. Let's take to Dean, who is in Bridgend. Hello, Dean.
Hello, how are you?
Very well indeed. What do you want to say about this arrest?
I want to say, right, there isn't just him that's been done this sort of crimes.
No, alleged to. I must be very clear, alleged to. We've got to be really clear. We have innocent until proven guilty in this country.
Yes, exactly. And the problem is this, right? You've got all these other perverts and people who've done bad things. Why ain't they getting arrested? Like, you've got 9 police forces involved. Why wasn't a 9 police force involved with the rob and rape gangs? Why wasn't Hugh Edwards done for public office offences when he did what he did? And what about all the other ones? Do you know what I mean?
You're just saying they pick and choose. I suppose because there's been public pressure in this case, and these Epstein files, again, have been very public. So it's something that's very much the public domain. It's on the front pages. It's being discussed on TV and radio shows. But that's the thing. You're right. The grooming gangs. And again, local police forces didn't investigate for years. They are now, but rather too slow. I think we can all agree.
Yeah, but it's two-tier policing again, right? They do it for public pressure, but the public pressure was there for the rob and rape gangs and all these immigration crimes that's going on, raping our young girls and stuff like that. Yeah. You don't hear anything about this, but it's always about him. What about all the other people who was there? What about all the presidents from the USA that was there? What about...
Yeah, but we're not in charge. Yeah, but that's a matter for the Americans. There are lots of names, and again, just because your name's in the Epstein files doesn't mean you've actually committed any actual wrongdoing. I mean, come on, we do need to stress that, and we do need to have a system where we go through the proper principles of justice. But look, I feel your pain. Why is anyone being arrested for a hurty tweet misgendering someone, for goodness sake, and the police don't have time to investigate the proper crimes that we are all actually concerned about? It is a complete. I mean, it's an Alice in Wonderland priorities for our police forces.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is, though, this right. I know he was a former prince and that type of stuff, right? But he hasn't been fingers of a crime. Like I said, he did pay the £12 million or whatever to the person to try and seal it. But like I said, he hasn't been done for a crime. What the police are doing now is wasting valuable policing that can be done now for other serious crimes.
You're saying
of child rape.
Too many resources are going into this because it's high profile now, and where they could be going on other crimes that actually have long missed out on investigation.
Yeah. Like other ones, like you hear these young girls. Oh, it was their own fault. Yeah. Being raped is not their own fault.
Exactly. When anyone refers to a child prostitute, you always just, frankly, I just want to slap people in the face for doing that. Dean, I understand your frustration, completely get it. Thank you very much indeed for that call. Georgina is in London. Georgina, off you go.
Good morning, Julia. Well, what a shenanigans this has turned out to be. This man, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, is now a walking liability for our royal family. He and his wife, ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, you can't let these people walk around doing what they're doing. They must be brought to account for their actions. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor allegedly has been giving secrets to the late Jeffrey Epstein, and if they find out, which they're making investigations now, that he has done that, then he will be incarcerated. They wouldn't have taken him in otherwise. He's got to be treated like any other man, and I think that the king is totally fed up with his behaviour. This is the only way that he's going to get his just desserts. He's been allowed to run amok for years doing what he wanted, Julia, and it's about time that he was actually made to pay his dues.
Well, again, I must stress, that he has not been actually charged with a crime, and that he actually has always said he's denied any wrongdoing. I think it's really important we keep remembering that. But certainly he should be questioned by the police, and he should be asked to account for himself, given the serious nature of a number of different allegations against him.
Well, the allegations that have been brought against him, as far as the Geopolitics is concerned, and now these allegations, they are very serious allegations, and he's been walking around as if he hasn't got a care in the world.
Yeah.
You know, Julia, if you play stupid games, my love, you win stupid prizes, and that's what he's done.
Okay, thank you, Georgina. All right, we're going to have to leave it there, Georgina. Again, I'm going to keep the phone lines open on this, but I really think, again, we cannot be judge and jury on this one. We all have our opinions. We've all been discussing this for many years. The moment someone is arrested, certainly more if he is ever charged with any wrongdoing, then, of course, you know, the discussions are affected by that. And I know they're not in America, and America tells us off and says, oh, you should have more freedom of speech. They're there for a reason. They're to make sure that if people are charged with a crime, and it could be you or me one day, that we do face a fair trial. Henry Hamilton, it's really important, that, isn't it?
No, it is absolutely, because the due process is most important for the least sympathetic victim.
Yeah, absolutely. A very, very, very important point to make. Absolutely. Look, there's plenty more to come. There's lots more to talk about. Lots more fantastic guests talking to us about the arrest of Andrew, the brother of the King, the second son of the late Queen Elizabeth. We're also going to be talking in the next hour to the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, about why he is among many senior figures calling for our defence spending to go up to 5%. That's double what it is now of GDP. We'll talk about that and plenty more besides. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, whether you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, fantastic to have your company, especially on, wow, what an extraordinary day this is. Because earlier this morning, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, as was Prince Andrew, was arrested by Thames Valley Police over misconduct in public office allegations. He is now in police custody after police arrived at the Sandringham estate, which is now his home in Norfolk. They're now searching that his home in Norfolk and a home in Berkshire, a previous home where, of course, he lived for many years at Royal Lodge. Although he has not been named by the police, they've said a man in his 60s has been arrested. It's very clear from the footage we are seeing from that estate that he is indeed the man who has been arrested on, would you believe, his 66th birthday. Happy birthday, Andrew. I don't think this was the gift perhaps that he was expecting. We'll be talking more about that with top guests throughout the show, including the former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth and also the former royal editor of The Sun, Charles Ray. Do get in touch. I want to hear your response to that extraordinary development in this story. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text costs £1 standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about Donald Trump's fresh attack on Keir Starmer's Chagos Islands deal. He says that we should not give away that Diego Garcia military base. Your reaction to that, please. Plus, we're also going to be talking in the next hour with Lord Dallet. He's the former head of the British Army and he's among those former defence chiefs and experts, people who really do know what they're doing when it comes to our defences. And bearing in mind that's very much linked to the Diego Garcia Chagos Islands story, but they're warning that Britain faces its 1936 moment and that Keir Starmer must spend not 2.5% of GDP, not 3% sometime in the next decade, but 5% of GDP on defence now. Your thoughts on that, very welcome as well. As I say, the number 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. I'm delighted to say joining me today is Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Always good to see you, Henry. Thanks for joining us. Didn't get much of a chat in the 10 hour because Robert Jenrick was in and it was we were discussing, we covered, of course, this royal development and all the other big stories. And there's no doubt at all this is a game changer when it comes to the news developments on the day. I think a lot of people were focused on Chagos Islands, a lot of people focused on some of the front pages on defence chiefs, and we'll come to those stories. And indeed, this radical shake-up of SEND, the special educational needs help for kids at school. But there's no doubt at all that the arrest of the son of the late Queen and the arrest of the King's own brother, is an extraordinary development in this story involving the Jeffrey Epstein. What is interesting, I think, though, is the fact we've been talking for, 10 years plus? We've been talking about these allegations from Virginia Giuffre that she was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein to have sex at the age of 17 in London and in London with Prince Andrew, as he was at the time. He's denied that. We all remember that Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis when he denied everything. She's claimed it also happened on Epstein's Island in the Caribbean and elsewhere. This has been rumbling on for many years. A £12 million payoff to Virginia Giuffre, paid for by the late Queen and largely also by our current King, King Charles. This story hasn't been going away. The publication of the Epstein files 2 weeks ago exploded this story, not just in terms of Andrew's links with Jeffrey Epstein and how close they were, the huge number of emails, but also these allegations, which also tie in with allegations for which there is now a police investigation for Lord Manderson, our former US ambassador, when he was business secretary to Gordon Brown back, way back when, that he had passed on confidential financial information from the government to Jeffrey Epstein, which he would have been able to make millions from. That Andrew did something similar is the allegation, according to these files, if they are genuine, that he, when he was UK trade envoy, a job for which he was handsomely paid, working for his own mother's government at the time, that he was actually using this not just for his own personal benefit, lots of golf trips, personal time, all on the taxpayer, all on huge expenses paid for by you and me, but also that he was passing these stories, this information to Jeffrey Epstein. This is what he's been arrested for. Your reaction to the police finally, I suppose, turning up at his estate and taking him in for questioning. He's currently in police custody right now.
Well, it is, first of all, I think, an important symbol to people who may be worried that there were people in this country for whom the law did not apply. That it does, in fact, and it doesn't matter if you're a Windsor. If there is a reason for the police to investigate you, they will investigate you, and they'll even rock up on your birthday. I do think it's one of the real difficulties with talking about this story, is that we've talked about, you know, this has been going on for ages and all the rest of it. It's important to stress that even if there had been absolutely no allegations from Virginia Giuffre or anyone else, if the Epstein files had been published, this material would have been in it, and there would be an investigation into this now. This is legally nothing to do with the allegations of sexual assault or impropriety or all the rest of it. And I think that given the way that the story has evolved and the way that it has been kept in the public consciousness, that is actually something that is quite tricky to keep in mind. Yeah. Is that this is a very specific allegation, potentially, I don't think he's been charged, about misconduct in public office. And it is not a belated arrest for the previous events or alleged events, and so that is going to be an incredibly difficult thing to keep threading in the public mind, I think.
Yeah, and again, I think in the callers that we took just before 11 o'clock actually as well, and again, I cannot stress this enough, the importance that we remember that people are and whether it was happened to us or a loved one of ours, or if it's somebody in the royal family, it doesn't matter who it is, that we must remember people are innocent until proven guilty, must go through due process. He hasn't been charged with any crime, he's denied all wrongdoing. I suppose it's one of those issues where allegations of sexual misdeed is often very difficult to prove. It's often, you know, whether it's, you know, allegations against a royal or you know, someone so-called date rape, a horrible phrase, that if often it is one person's word against another's. In the case of these allegations for which he's been arrested, you're talking about stuff that is there in black and white. If these documents are true, would that be a crime if you had that information as the UK trade envoy and you pass that information to someone else, anyone else, let alone Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted paedophile? And you know, would you know that that information would be financially useful to that person and that you should not hand it on? Those are the questions that the police will be looking at. It has to be said, given Prince Andrew's appearance with Emily Maitlis in that Newsnight interview, I hope he's got a good lawyer. That's all I'm going to say, because I think he thought at the time, and again, before the interview, he thought it was a good idea. After the interview, he, by all accounts, you know, wandered down the corridor and thought he'd done a jolly good job and informed the Queen's staff that he'd done a jolly good job. And of course, it absolutely blew up in his face. Not just his attitude, his arrogance, what he did say, what he didn't say, but also the string of things that he did say, which were instantly then able to be questioned. Where he was, you know, could he swear, all these sort of things. And so, there is a certain, let's face it, we know this is a man who's very much a do you know who I am character. This has been well documented over the years. Yes. And very much someone who has perhaps a rather ill-advised, grandiose sense of his own not only importance but also intelligence and wiliness, that these police interviews may not go as well as even the Emily Maitlis interview, which went very badly.
I mean, you would think, surely, at this point, even if you're a condescending fool who is not inclined to take a journalist seriously, when you're in the inside of a police station, you do just let your lawyer do the talking. I mean,
that would be my advice if I were his lawyer.
If he hasn't learnt that lesson, then the consequences will be his to bear.
Do you trust? I mean, again, you're saying no one's above the law, and this is something that Keir Starmer has said. But a lot of people will feel that actually, until this point, well, absolutely, the royals have been above the law. I've still got very big question marks about the investigation just disappearing. It was exposed by the Sunday Times of King Charles when he was Prince Charles, accepting, you know, carrier bags of money from Middle Eastern businessmen for a charitable effort. But the money, and in return for his closest, longest-standing, most loyal aide, promised in a letter in black and white, was in return for for a British I think it was a British passport, or was it a peerage or something of some, not peerage, an honour of some sort. This stuff's in the public domain, and the moment the king acceded to the throne, that investigation appeared to just disappear. There is an urge, because for me, I don't care whether you're a monarchist or a Republican or anywhere in between. I do think nobody's above the law. The reality is the monarch is above the law. The monarch, it is when,
the monarch
when
is
you,
the law.
The monarch is the law. When you go to, if you go to you get charged with a crime and you appear in court, it is the crown against you.
Indeed.
You know, this is the thing to remember. The king and the queen previously not required to pay any tax. Under the law, although the Queen did pay some tax, we were told, and the King did, and he did as Prince Charles, we don't know what rate. They don't pay corporation tax like everyone else does. They don't pay inheritance tax.
They give the vast bulk of the revenue of the Crown Estate to the government, and then only take a bit of it back.
That's because it's the national estate, but they're not required to. They're not. They are above the law. They are above the law, and so technically, do we trust that this investigation will be a fair investigation, the sort of investigation that you or I would face in the same circumstances? Or do you worry that things will disappear and dissipate? Or do you think now the public demand that this is properly investigated and charges are brought if they are deemed reasonable, and that a case is brought to court if there is a case to be heard, and that people, jury gets to decide this? I don't know. Does this still cover under a jury under this government? Do you think that public demand for that is going to mean that will happen?
So I think that one thing which we've talked about before and one of your callers alluded to is the sense of this kind of arbitrariness on the side of the police, right? Essentially that they seem to come down very hard on one thing and completely ignore something else. So I think that however lackadaisical they have been about Andrew in the past, I would suggest that actually he probably now faces a far more rigorous investigation than you or I ever would. The police seem perfectly capable of overlooking common or garden offenders in all sorts of ways. But now, as you say, the spotlight is exactly on them. I think that, as far as I'm aware, if there are any serious allegations against other members of the royal family, they will now be followed up. And I think that there is something slightly corrosive about this once it sets in. And I understand why it's set in, but it's sort of unfalsifiable, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
People will be like, well, I mean, of course they didn't go after the king because he's the king. And so there's no way of actually proving that justice has been done in this case. And that is hugely damaging.
But it is really important that people have faith that, again, that we are all equal under the law. And certainly with all the two-tier policing we've seen of different racial groups, whether it's, trans activists attacking women and women misgendering a trans activist, and the police acting completely differently, whether it's pro-Palestine marches or whether it's Jewish people wanting to hold a march. There does appear to be a completely double standard by the police all the time in many areas. So I think a lot of people are very untrusting, and I think that is the real concern. I wrote a piece of The Sun the other week about the issue of like the grooming gangs in Britain not being investigated all that time, and the Epstein. It's undoubted the case that if Jeffrey Epstein was a paedophile and would have probably could have gone to prison for life in the United States if he'd I don't believe he committed suicide. I believe he didn't die behind bars after the charges. But I pointed out, this is just geography. This is just because you're being raped you have a private jet to your beautiful island to be raped, or whether it's a minicab to above a kebab shop in Rotherham. It's the same crime taking place, but somehow both were allowed to act with impunity for many years, but for very different reasons.
I think this is actually going to look, if ever we come to look back on this period, it'll be one of the most dangerous and damaging things we did, which is that we responded to an increasingly diverse Britain with fragmentation of law enforcement.
Yeah.
Right? And actually, if you want a diverse society, the most important thing is that everybody is equal under the law, everybody is subject to the same law and has access to justice.
Absolutely crucial.
Right? Because what we've heard not just on this show, but what we get as comments to Conhome, and you can see it when you look at focus groups of voters, is
and you'll represent grassroots Tory
conservatives,
voters.
Is that belief, that corrosive belief that they treat us differently. Oh, they wouldn't look into that. They wouldn't look into that. The moment that happens, the police depend on the consent of the public.
Exactly.
Right?
Very, very important.
We don't have a big paramilitary police force with lots of sort of black armour and truncheons and everything.
Yeah.
The police depend on the public. They depend on women to come forward when they've been attacked. They depend on people to cooperate broadly. And if this persists, this rotten perception that they are behaving politically, it will destroy policing.
But I don't think it's a perception. I don't think it's feeling. I think it's a reality.
Oh, no, sorry, yes.
I mean, that is the truth, isn't it? Look, I want to hear your thoughts. Lots of calls coming in. We will get your calls at 0344 499 1000. I also just want to talk to you about Starmer being told by Donald Trump, you mustn't give away the Chagos Islands. This is like the third different view of Trump. He seems to change his mind. The State Department and the White House, in American State Department running their foreign policy, seem to have very different views on whether or not it's a good idea for us to hand over the Chagos Islands for no legal or moral reason to the Mauritians who've never been in charge of the Chagos Islands, and to basically then lease back it. Well, Tories estimate it as 35 billion quid over a century, but very much front loaded. So we're paying more money now than in the future to rent back the Diego Garcia military base. Given that there's talk about US airstrikes on Iran in the next few days, given that airstrikes on the Middle East have often involved jets taking off from, guess where? Diego Garcia base in the Chagos Islands, you can understand why Donald Trump would think that. Interestingly, that Ian Duncan Smith, who's going to be on the show a bit later, has been out in Washington putting the case for not handing over the Chagos Islands. It is extraordinary that may or may not still be going ahead. We still don't know whether it is, but the latest we've got from Politico this morning is that ministers have put the British Indian Ocean Territory bill, which is on hold. They'd already put it on hold last month. This is the bill that's still going through Parliament, after the President called the deal an act of great stupidity. They'd feared there'd be a wrecking amendment from your lot, the Conservatives. But then there was it's now been confirmed that there will be a rethink. I mean, this changes by the hour almost, depending on what Donald Trump has said. But do you think we will ever actually see this deal go through?
I mean, it feels increasingly unlikely. I think if there is an operation in Iran, that will put an end to it, because essentially there is a conflict here between two elements of US foreign policy, one of which, the State Department view, is effectively, we want to butter India up, we'll do a bit of reflexive anti-colonial stuff, although of course Mauritians had never actually run Diego Garcia, and the native inhabitants really don't like Mauritius. On the other hand, you have the Pentagon, which is saying, oh my goodness, Mr. President, you want to bomb Iran? Well, you're about to lose sovereignty over our base near Iran. How do you propose to do this? Yeah. And I think that actually it is probably some very sharp briefings from senior generals in the White House which has impressed upon Trump the centrality of that base. Yeah. And if there is an operation, which means presumably there will be ongoing operations for some time, I cannot see it happening. No, exactly. I mean, we shall wait and see. What do you make of this call from very senior military figures that Britain faces a 1936 moment, defence chiefs and spy bosses and senior figures who absolutely know what they're talking about, including our guest in the next 10 minutes, Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army, saying we need to double spending right now because our forces are being hollowed out and we are simply not prepared for war. I mean, on the matter, they're completely correct. Britain doesn't have a single deployable division. We abolished the railway regiment, so we can't actually get our inadequate number of tanks to Eastern Europe if we wanted to. The surface fleet is as small as it's ever been. You have seen this for some time, right? Generals basically saying, oh my goodness, we might need conscription, and politicians going, please be quiet about this. There was a fascinating report from the US Army War College in 2023 saying that they looked at the Ukraine war, which is the first major sort of peer war in a long time, and they suggested that the US, if it got involved in such a conflict, would take 50,000 casualties in 2 weeks. But the thing is, where are you going to find the money? We talk about 1936. They were playing on hard mode. They rearmed and balanced the budget. Yes. They weren't even borrowing. Don't think we had a whole load of people claiming anxiety and ADHD on welfare at the time. I was reading it recently. You talk about Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain rearmed, but he did it running a budget surplus. Yeah. Today's politicians only need to do one of those two things, and they're going to fail at that. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to take an awful lot longer. It's going to cost a lot more, and half the tanks and jets won't work anyway. That's the terrifying reality, isn't it? I must ask you about one other story. I'm always fascinated by the stories that the BBC gets their knickers in a twist about. And this is this couple, British couple in their 50s, Lindsay and Craig Foreman. They have been on an around the world motorbike tour, and one of the countries they decided they want to go to was Iran. Now, they got arrested in Iran in January last year, and they have spent, 13 months behind bars already in Iran on spying charges. They've now been told, despite there's been no trial, because there isn't any due process in Iran, among the reasons why you shouldn't go there, on espionage charges. They've been sentenced to 10 years behind bars. Foreign Office said they're working for them. Their children, adult children, are pleading for help. And I've got every sympathy for the children. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm fairly sympathetic to this couple. You know, I doubt they very much that they are spies. However,
the Foreign Office advice now and in January 2025 when they travelled to Iran was against all travel. The advice was against travel. There was even a handy map of where you shouldn't travel. You know, because people like Egypt, they'd be like, oh, Sharm el-Sheikh safe and you know, and the capital safe, but you can't go anywhere else. It's very clear. The whole of Iran is marked red with advice against all travel. If people choose to ignore the clear warning from the government for their own safety that you cannot travel to Iran because they may well arrest you on trumped-up charges and put you behind bars and use you as a bargaining tool against our own country, should we be offering them any help, or should we just say, you know what, Fafo, you know, I'm sorry, you messed around, to use a different word, and you found out, and I'm sorry, if you're going to do something that dumb, live with the consequences?
Channeling your inner Lee Kuan Yew there. I mean, broadly, I agree with you. I think I am very sad that I will not, for the foreseeable future, get to visit Iran. I have friends on French passports who do. But ultimately, the hippie trail closed in 1979 when they overthrew the Shah. It has been known for about 40 years that you can't, as a British person on a British passport, travel safely to Iran.
Yeah, have they heard of Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe? I mean...
And if you want to go around the world, fine. Kazakhstan is there. Uzbekistan is safe. Tajikistan... Like, you don't need to do this. This was enormously self-indulgent. And whilst the British government does have a responsibility, at least to try and get citizens out when they get into trouble, nonetheless, it is just criminally irresponsible. It is a waste of Foreign Office resources.
Absolutely.
And they had no excuse.
Couldn't agree with them more. I really couldn't. It's just extraordinary. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to take your calls. Lots coming in on Andrew, the brother of the King, arrested over allegations of misconduct in public office as exposed in the Epstein files. Denied any wrongdoing, of course. He is currently in police custody. Your reaction? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Join me, Ian Collins, every weekday from 1.
My 12-year-old. Obviously, he won't be 12 then, he'll be 16, but if he's anything like he is now, he shouldn't be anywhere near an election booth. Do you sympathise with him? Is he the victim of the 24-hour news cycle we just spoke of?
I think his failings are internal. He's useless, incompetent, has no political judgment.
Everything you need to know. All the breaking news right here on Talk.
Weekday afternoons from 1 o'clock. Only at the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. This is Talk 11:26 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. Particularly, you want to get in touch with us. Not a surprise about extraordinary breaking news in the last couple of hours that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, has been arrested. Is in the custody of the police over allegations of misconduct in public office after his home and his previous home have been searched by the police. Let's talk to David, who's in Gloucestershire. Hello, David.
Good morning, Julia. How are we all?
Very well indeed, thank you. Probably rather better off than Andrew is on his 66th birthday today. What do you want to say?
Well, good enough for him, but hey-ho. What I really wanted to say was
I think this has been done and pushed through very, very fast to save the royal family. I really do. I think it has got that serious because there's talk now that Charles has got to abdicate. You know, if this carries on, I think they're trying to save the royal family, full stop.
You think that actually, yeah, so, I mean, all these years when he wasn't even questioned about Virginia Giuffre allegations, these Epstein files, this stuff emerged, you know, about less than 10 days ago. Now, absolutely, police have gone in.
Yeah, and the other thing I really want to know, I mean, maybe you can't talk about it, it's a live case, but where are we with Mandelson? Is he a flight risk? You know?
Well, I mean, he has. I mean, he's certainly being investigated. We know that. I imagine it'd be rather difficult for him to. Again, he's also another person facing allegations of misconduct in public office, but has not been arrested and has denied any wrongdoing. Again, I must stress that. Yeah, I mean, I imagine it'd be quite hard for him to sort of, you know, slip out of the country, given how famous he is. But there we are. But do you think this is the right thing? Because there has been this concern that, you know, Andrew's been untouchable, and I've had guests on the show and callers saying very recently, OK, he's lost his HRH, he's lost his titles, he's, you know, banished to Norfolk, but you know what, he's living the life of Riley in a much nicer home, much better salaries, and much better incomes than basically from his brother than any of us would ever get, and you know, he's not faced the proper investigations that he should face.
Well, I think this is the big question, isn't it, about the fact that he's been... If they moved it to somewhere very quiet and said, right, there's a cottage, we'll provide you with food, we'll provide you with a safe room and security if you need it, he couldn't have been that much of a risk, because otherwise he wouldn't have been allowed to ride around Windsor willy-nilly, so that's quite honestly... But, you know, I think in this day and age, with, you know, with the cost of living and everything, and everybody's suffered around it, to see one person who's, you know, like this, being treated with a life of luxury, you know, it's a lottery winner style, you know. Yeah. You know, let's be honest.
I never understood where they got that amazing £10 million ski chalet. I mean, that was like, where did that come from, the Fergusons? But this is the thing, isn't it? I think a lot of people are just going like, you know what, you lived in the lap of luxury, and part of the deal for the royals, even for people who are staunch monarchists, is that it's about a life of duty. And yeah, he served in the Falklands, and we told you, he did this amazing job as UK trade envoy. Now, some very big question marks about that. That's the subject of this police investigation, that he didn't live up to his end of the bargain.
Well, I think this is it. I mean, if the allegations prove to be true, as far as I'm concerned, throw him in prison. And if he serves 25 years, well, that'll be the end of it. Okay. And for, you know... And again, it's all, I must stress, it's an if, of course, not being charged even with a crime, and certainly has denied any wrongdoing. David, thank you for that. I feel I'm going to be saying those phrases a lot today, but I do need to do that. Alex is in Bristol. Alex, what do you want to say?
Yeah, well, you won't have to say that to me. I'm very concerned about the amount of... Now, I'll just preface this by saying I'm not a royalist. I have actually met Andrew in real life. I wasn't warned to him. We were warned. It was a do I went to. We were warned that he was a bit of a ladies' man, and it proved to be, because he was all over the ladies. However, he's been born into this life of luxury. In his day, he was not an unattractive man and had women from all over the world throwing themselves at him. And he has been untouchable, like they all are. And I don't suppose he's any different to any royal from around the world. Yeah. But describing him, as some of your presenters have done, I noticed yesterday I was a bit taken aback as a wrong un. He's not been charged or convicted of anything yet. So all they're doing is prejudicing
No, but there were no live charges. You've got to remember, the rules are very, very different. You know, whether someone has been arrested, once someone's arrested and a charge is possibly forthcoming, then you have to adjust it. Once the charge is brought, absolutely stricter. And obviously we mustn't prejudice if and when there is any case to answer. But I think people, when there are no charges in the air, are perfectly entitled to say they believe that Andrew is a wrong-un, because you can be a wrong-un without actually being accused of a crime. We've all met plenty of wrong-uns in our life, and we go, he or she, they're a wrong-un, and we don't actually mean they're necessarily criminal. We're just like, you know, don't date them, don't go into business with them, or whatever.
Yeah, but the feeling you get when they say it and when the presenters say it is they sort of put they're saying in conjunction with Jeffrey Epstein, which is very serious, obviously, and it sort of gives you an impression. However, all I would say is, the police need to do the work. Do I think anything will come of any of this? Absolutely not.
Very interesting, very interesting. I have to say, I think choosing to be mates and staying at the house of someone who's been convicted on child sex prostitution charges, I think makes you a wrong 'un. And we know he did that. He's admitted that in the interview with Emily Maitlis. So that's not prejudicing anything. I think that alone makes you a wrong un.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with the sentiment of the way you're using the term, but I was a bit concerned yesterday and very vehement. And just finally, what I would like to know is I've noticed Andrew Lownie's been on your programme quite a lot of time.
Well, actually, he's been on the breakfast show. I've only managed to have Andrew Lownie on yesterday. And it was great to actually finally get him on because he's written about a lot of this a long time ago.
But he's very, very adamant to get him, isn't it? I want to know. I haven't read, and perhaps I've just missed it, what his motivation was for starting all it. Because when you listen to him talking, he by the sound of it, he wants to see him at the guillotine with his head cut off because he's very, very passionate about it and where that all began.
Well, I imagine, like a lot of people, if you do, again, about any topic, if you are writing about something, you're investigating something, you believe there's a story there and you believe you've seen the evidence, you've been contacting the police for a long time, contacting the palace, you're not getting anywhere, but you believe there has been wrongdoing, I imagine you would be rather pleased to see these developments. But Alex, really interesting call. Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Henry Hill is still with me. It is interesting, he's saying, look, he's not a royalist, but it is important we maintain, the presumption of innocence. But when the story has been in the public domain so much, it can be quite hard, and I can imagine an awful lot of people on social media making some very big mistakes over the next few weeks and months.
I mean, absolutely. So there is obviously the law governing the coverage of live cases, and we do have to be very careful about that. But I do think, and this has been one of my slightly less sort of fashionable positions on this, which is there's been a lot of criticism, why didn't Charles act sooner, why didn't, and especially in some Republican quarters, I think in the New Statesman there was an article where they said essentially, why is it that he's only been stripped of his royal titles? Why hasn't Charles? And it's like, well, the king doesn't actually have the ability to impose criminal sanctions on people at will,
or force him to go and testify,
and it does matter that he's not been convicted of anything.
Right? It absolutely does.
And I think a lot of people just assume that the Giuffre allegations would stand up. They've never been tested in court.
That's a very, very good point. 11:34 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we are going to talk to the former royal editor of The Sun, that's Charlie Ray. We're also going to be talking to Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army, about how much we should be spending on defence, and what does he make of that latest Chagos Islands development from Donald Trump. That's all coming up. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:36 is the time. Let's talk more about, of course, Andrew, as was Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, being arrested by Thames Valley Police over accusations of misconduct in public office. He is currently in police custody. His home in the Norfolk estate, in the Sandringham estate, is being searched, as indeed we understand is Royal Lodge's former home in Berkshire, of course. Let's talk about this now with the former royal editor of The Sun, Charlie Ray, joins us. Charlie, thank you very much for joining us. It's an extraordinary development in this story. I think the one that will come as a surprise to a lot of us, not least to Andrew on his 66th birthday.
Well, yes, if he thought the old Bill were just turning up with a cake, he had another thing coming. There certainly won't be a file to get out of jail quickly on this one. But yeah, absolutely extraordinary what's happened today. Very serious allegations have been lodged against him. As you quite rightly say, the police have arrested him and he's now in custody. He's going to have a lot of answers to an awful lot of questions. And it won't be just Emily Maitlis in that Newsnight interview. These will be guys who will be really, probing exactly what he did, when he did it and how he did it.
Yeah.
And they've got, well, we think they've got certain pieces of evidence because there are emails which suggest that he gave away certain secrets, confidential matters, allegedly.
Yeah, and again, it is. We must stress that he has denied any wrongdoing, and of course, it all depends on whether these documents contained in the Epstein files are genuine. And of course, there's quite a high bar for misconduct in public office in terms of your intentions when you do so. I mean, the various different defences to that. Let's just go back a bit though, because look, I've known you for many years. When I was a news reporter, we'd be out on the beat, on the doorsteps, and you were a royal editor, you were a royal reporter for far too long, longer than we can remember. You got close to the Queen used to come over and say hello to you. The King, William and Kate. They know who you are. They chatted with you. You know these people. Your dealings with Andrew, when he was Prince Andrew, he always had a reputation. There was Randy Andy, there was reputations, with the women. There was also, there was a time when he was a war hero when he had fought in the Falklands, but also when he was a UK trade envoy, and that's what these allegations relate to. That he was basically, having a nice time, swanning around the world, being very arrogant and rude to people, playing golf at our expense. What was the Andrew that you met? What was he like? What is he like?
Well, I met him several times, interviewed him a couple of times he was the patron of the NSPCC, if I remember, one of their campaigns, and I interviewed him then. He was always an arrogant man, Julia. There was, when I've met other members of the royal family, it's always been, after you go through the formalities of ma'am and everything else, it's always been, happy conversations. You could have a laugh and a giggle with him. There was nothing like that with Andrew. I mean, he made it clear to you, I am a prince of the realm and you are well below my standing. Yeah. Let's not forget that, So he was always there's always just two types of roles. There's the Andrew ones who want to make it clear that they've got a royal position and you should remember who they are. And then there's the others. Yes, you remember, there's respect and everything else, but they do come across as actually got some sort of humanity. And, a bit, I like you, Julia, I like people who enjoy life. I like people who have a giggle and a laugh with you and, talk to you properly.
Yeah.
And
well, I don't like being talked down to, that's for sure.
No, I'm like you. He didn't actually talk down to me, but I wasn't exactly comfortable in his company because I just knew he was a bit. Well, not a bit arrogant. He was more.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've heard from many people who've had dealings with him. There's the thing about these allegations, of course. These are allegations contained in the Epstein files, and again, they're denying of any wrongdoing. But a lot of people might be wondering, well, hold on a minute. There've been allegations against this man for a very, very long time. Sure. Police never even bothered to investigate after the allegations from Virginia Giuffre. Now, my guest Henry Hill is pointing out that these things have never been tested in court, even in the civil case that was brought by Virginia Giuffre in the States. There was a payoff. There was a non-disclosure non-disclosure agreement, all of that. Well, certain amounts of non-disclosure, an awful lot's gone in her books. But she sadly is no longer here, having taken her own life, as many victims of abuse, and we know she was a victim of Jeffrey Epstein, do sadly do. But a lot of people wondering, like, well, how come it's these allegations contained in emails about misconduct in public office that have seen the first arrest of this man, rather than him ever being questioned over goodness knows how many years, the best part of a decade, over the allegations of wrongdoing in relation to young women and girls?
Well, this has surprised me as well, Julia. I cannot understand why the police did not at least speak to Andrew about the allegations made by Virginia Giuffre. There wasn't anything the police here could do about allegations that were in the States, because that's a different organisation completely. But she was claiming that she was trafficked to London to be with the prince. Now that surely is something that can be challenged, as well as what did the bodyguards actually know? Did they turn a blind eye? I think the Met actually had a cursory look at one of the bodyguards and said, well, there's nothing here, move on. Well, that's not good enough.
But that was over a specific allegation, again, contained in leaked Epstein files, that Andrew had said to one of his bodyguards, or written to him, saying, can you dig up some dirt on Virginia Giuffre? Now, simply asking that would be misconduct in public office. A police officer then doing that would absolutely be misconduct in public office by that officer, but we've had no investigation.
How that poor officer was supposed to try and work out something that was, a United States Social Security number, everything's based in the net. How are we supposed to work that out from Windsor? I mean, it's an impossible. One can only think, well, he clearly didn't do it, because how could he possibly do it? But they still need to have a look at. I mean, there are, in one of the emails, I think it quite clearly states from Epstein that 2 of Andrew's bodyguards were actually with him at that house in New York. Now, unless they were walking around blindfolded and cotton wool stuck in their ears, they must have seen something or other. They may not have been in the same room as Andrew, whoever else he was.
And we've got the same on the island, and we've got testimony from staff and indeed from many others who've been on that island, and some of the young women who were victims. It was just, it was impossible to ignore. Again, lots of questions to answer, but this is something that we've discussed with Di Davies, who you had on the show earlier, former head of Royal Protection, and indeed Dickie Arbiter, who was press secretary to the late Queen, and he's coming on the show later. And they both said in recent months, look. And Andrew Lowney, the royal author as well. The idea that this information was known by Royal Protection officers, that it didn't go to senior, Met officers, that it didn't go up the chain of command in Buckingham Palace, that the Queen's, most political, private secretary didn't know, that the then Prince of Wales, now King Charles's senior staff didn't know, and that they didn't know, is questionable. Do you think there are now issues for the monarchy as a whole, and does this arrest perhaps help King Charles, or does it hurt him, because the damage is being done to the royal institution, but there's also an element where people are going, no one's above the law?
No, I think it helps the king and the other members of the royal family. I mean, they're going to be tainted with this arrest and everything else, but it does help because, Julia, what has been happening just recently, and we saw even Prince William in Saudi Arabia, that are questions being shouted out at members of the royal family when they turn up on royal visits about what did you know about Andrew. Now, this should satisfy, I hope, would satisfy people. There is only so much, I think Henry was actually the one who said, there's only so much the king could have done, and he's done everything he could do. He's not responsible for prosecutions of anybody,
or for his brother. I mean, we've all got family members. We're not responsible for what they do. That said, when you contribute to a fund of $1.5 million, by all accounts, according to the Sun, to pay a woman who's alleged wrongdoing by your brother, and when you are basically funding his lifestyle as he was, and he still is in Norfolk, but was in Windsor, to a certain extent, people would say, well, you do have a responsibility.
But the king is funding his lifestyle at the moment out of his own pocket. It's not coming out of your purse or my wallet or anything like that, or your viewers and listeners. So it's not coming out of taxpayers' money. So from that point of view, there is not much else the king or the Prince of Wales could have done. They've done everything they possibly can. We now got to wait now for the law to take its process.
Yes.
And I would hope that we don't forget about those poor innocent victims, that the other allegations surround about, that they are in still time for them to be investigated as well. I know Virginia Giuffre's died, unfortunately, but there was this supposed Russian girl who was shipped in here and who went to Buckingham Palace. Well, we don't know what happened behind closed doors, but clearly, you know, she wasn't there to read his fortune.
No, and not there for his great conversation. We've got 9 different police forces working together, haven't we? Charlie Ray, great to hear from you, former royal editor of The Sun. I have a feeling we'll be talking about this for quite some time to come. I'm going to take a quick break now, 11:46. We're going to be talking to Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army, about, well, how much we should be spending on defence to actually make sure we can, well, I don't know, defend our country. That's up next. This is Talk.
Why have the progressive left ignored these Black Islanders?
Because they are the wrong kind of Black Islanders. They're very loyal to the Crown. You know, Misley, as you showed, I think on your programme yesterday, lands on the islands and says, "God save the King." I mean, that I think just triggers a few of these human rights lawyer types. It fills them with ideas of imperial domination and all that. I mean, the reality is the only places still under the British Crown are the places that did not want to be pushed out.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. Well, let's turn our attention away from Andrew very briefly. We will come back to that issue, and of course we'll get to your calls as well in the next half hour. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to have your say on any of the topics we're talking about, in it all, including, of course, what we're talking about right now with my next guest. He's the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, and he's among the senior former defence chiefs and defence secretaries and other experts in the field who have called on the government to forget this 2.5 or 3% of GDP being spent on defence, but actually going to a full 5%, doubling our expenditure as a percentage of our national income on defence, and to do so now. Well, let's talk about that with Lord Dannatt right now. Good morning to you, sir.
Julia, good morning.
You were among the signatories to this letter to the government, urging them to up the spending. You and I have discussed this topic many, many times. Why is the figure of 5% and how crucial, and how soon should it be?
Well, the figure 5% is the total figure, if you like, of the resources that a number of us are calling on for the government to spend. Now, within that 5%, we are urging the government to commit to 3% by 2029 and 3.5% by the end of the next Parliament, 2034. And up to 3.5% is what we judge is needed to provide our armed forces with the hardware, the ammunition, the logistics, and all necessary stuff that defence requires in order for us to have a credible military capability. Now, the other 1.5% are additional things that we believe that this government needs to do to increase our overall national resilience. Now, some of that can be rather unusual things, like making certain bridges strong enough for main battle tanks to cross over. Not quite such an important subject in this country, but overall resilience would take up that other 1.5%. Right. But the really critical thing, and this is the really critical thing, is the government needs to announce now how it's going to, over the next few years, get us to 3% by 2029 and 3.5% by 2034.
Yeah.
And why that's so important is that British industry will fire itself up. It'll make what we need to make. It'll make the ammunition that we require, but it won't do so until the money's on the table and contracts can be signed, and contracts that they have confidence in, so the government will pay the bills to meet.
That's rather crucial, isn't it? And in terms of the actual money we're talking about, this has got to come from somewhere. We don't have any at the moment. It's either spending that's not going to go on something else, or it's raising taxes, or trying to borrow, but with our extortionate interest rates we're paying right now, I'm not sure that's an option on the money markets. By upping the money to 5%, how much extra money would that be a year?
Well, the full 5% would be a doubling of the defence budget, which is currently moving to around about 2.5%. So we're talking about...
It's about 60 billion a year currently?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, 60 rising to 65. So that doubling would be huge. Now, that is unrealistic to say to the government, come on, you've got to do that overnight. Yeah. Come back to my original point. What we need to see is the sensible glide path upwards to 3% by 2029 and 3.5% by 2034. And the other aspects can follow later.
Yeah, and part of that is actually the impossibility of actually spending that amount right now. We're not in wartime, unless we move to a wartime economy. We don't have, the factories. The orders take a long time, and that's part of the issue. Look, we know during the Second World War, we know during times of war, things speed up massively when there's that focus. But building tanks, building aircraft carriers, building, jets, and it seems to take a heck of a lot of time. B, it always seems to cost an awful lot more than we originally think it's going to cost. And C, a lot of this stuff appears to not work or not be compatible with other military hardware that we have. How do we get over that issue?
Well, this is a perennial issue that the Ministry of Defence has been grappling with for many years and must continue to grapple with and must continue to do better. You're absolutely right. In times of war, the procurement cycle accelerates rapidly. You've only got to look at what the Ukrainians have done over the last 4 years, and it's extraordinary how rapidly they've been able to adapt and produce new equipment and produce what they need in the face of changing circumstances. The Ministry of Defence has got to become more agile. It's got to reduce its bureaucracy. It's got to reduce its red tape. Now, you're absolutely right to say that even with the best will in the world, it takes time for British industry to gear itself up, but it will do so. And frankly, why not? Because industry, private companies, they want to make a profit. They want to do what is needed.
Indeed.
But in the short term, we may well have to buy off the shelf, and that probably means buying American.
Yes.
Now, that's all well and good, but then you come back to the issue of making sure the equipment in your inventory is compatible one thing with another and one country with another. So these collaborative projects, which we've been party to a number of them, particularly European projects, they're important because it produces commonality of product and it produces commonality of operating procedures.
Yeah.
So none of these things are easy, but frankly, they start with money. And unless the government is going to put more money on the table, you're not going to fire up the system to start moving as quickly as it should do. And it's in the face of Putin's Russia, frankly, the need is urgent and it's got to be met.
And this thing, we're often called warmongers when we talk about this. One thing I've been very sure of over the years, whenever I talk to people like you who face the reality of war, is definitely not warmongers, because you know the full horror of what it is like on the battlefield for our men and women. But this is the thing, isn't it? Like, if we build up our military, and if our allies do so as well, the less likely it is we will have to use them. But in this letter, it talks about Britain facing a 1936 moment because of the context of Russian aggression, the US sort of pulling away from NATO and the return of Islamic State. What do you mean by a 1936 moment?
Well, put it this way, Julia. In 1935, we were spending just less than 3% of GDP on defence, and we failed to either deter or appease Hitler. When the war had broken out because our deterrence had failed, the 3% shot up to 19%. And in 1940, when we were fighting for our very lives, it went to 46%. Those figures are the horrendous costs of fighting a war. Yeah. How much better, and this is the argument, to learn the lessons of history, to learn the lessons of what didn't happen in the mid to late 1930s, apply those lessons now spend what needs to be spent now to deter future aggression, so that the next generation of young men and women doesn't have to fight the bloody battles that my father's and grandfather's generation fought in the First and Second World War.
Absolutely. Can I ask you also about the significance of the strategic position of the Diego Garcia military base on the Chagos Islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean? We've had the Donald Trump's view, or it seems the American view seems to change with the wind, but now it's currently saying that it's a very bad idea for Keir Starmer to give away the Chagos Islands and then lease back the Diego Garcia military base from Mauritius. Do you think Trump this week is right or Trump last week is right?
Well, what is important is that that base on Diego Garcia, which is nominally British owned and run, but actually very much for the benefit of the Americans, that base remains available. It's critical to the United States' stance in the Indo-Pacific, and it may well be, as Donald Trump is saying, they want to use it as a base if they find that they need to take action against Iran. The important thing is that that base remains available. Now, previous government and the present government thought that probably the best way to ensure that was to do some kind of deal with Mauritius and lease the base back. But frankly, what we're understanding is that in sort of human rights terms, that's the ideal thing to do, but it's probably not that necessary. And frankly, when resources are constrained, I think dumping this deal and let the status quo continue, ride any human rights complaints that there might be, and use the money that otherwise would be spent on this increasingly odd-looking deal, spend that on our overall defence capability, and we're making better use of our money.
Absolutely. I don't even think there's a human rights case. There we are. Just finally, I must ask you about... Yeah, well, yeah, but that's a very different argument, isn't it, from the one that we've certainly had from the government. Just ask you just very briefly about obviously the breaking news story this morning about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, who has been arrested, is currently in custody of the police, facing accusations of misconduct in public office when he was a UK trade envoy. Now, obviously, he's denied any wrongdoing. No charges have been brought. He is an ex-military man. There was a time when this man was considered, a war hero from the Falklands War. He'd done his time, he'd done his duty in the military. Your reaction, if you would, to the news of his arrest?
Well, on your last point, Julia, you can't take anything away from anyone that's worked on behalf of their own country. And as far as his naval service was concerned and service in the Falklands, I think his record, it's fair that he stands on that record. Now, the other things that he's done in his life, frankly, he denies wrongdoing. I have no idea whether he has done wrong or whether he's done right. The fact of the matter is that the palace has said that if he needs to be investigated, they will support that. The police are conducting investigations, and they felt it right to arrest Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor today. So, frankly, I know nothing more. Like you, one watches with dismay, with interest, and I think the due process has got to take its course. And as everyone is saying, nobody is above the law. The King has made it quite clear that his brother is not above the law, and I think the law has now got to take its course and run due process.
A very diplomatic answer from the former head of the British Army there. Very much appreciate you joining us, Richard Lord Dannett. Thank you very much indeed. I'll get Henry Hill's response to what he had to say about our defences and indeed the Chagos Islands up next, but also talk about Chagos Islands with someone who's talked about this quite an awful lot and has actually been at in America and in Washington, and may indeed have actually been party to why Donald Trump has changed his stance on that Diego Garcia base. We'll talk to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith and, of course, more on the extraordinary revelations that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been arrested by the police. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. An awful lot of common sense being talked on the show today, that's for sure. Whether it's from us in the studio or you down the line. Can't wait to get to more of your calls. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you so much for your company. Lots of you getting in touch. We were asking you originally about Donald Trump blasting Keir Starmer's Chagos Islands deals. He told the Prime Minister not to give away, those are his words, not to give away the Diego Garcia military base. This comes with this conversation we just had with Lord Dannatt, the former head of the British Army, about our defence spending and why we should be spending up to 5% in the next decade on our defences to deter Russia and other aggressors. But no, those stories all absolutely overtaken by the extraordinary breaking news in the last few hours that the King's brother, the late Queen's son, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, Prince Andrew as was, has been arrested by Thames Valley Police. They arrived in unmarked police cars to his house on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk this morning, and he was taken away in police custody and remains in police custody at this time, facing accusations of misconduct in public office. Now, he, of course, has denied all wrongdoing. And, of course, we now know there are 9 different police forces around the country that are investigating allegations against the Prince, some of which are contained in the Epstein files, some of which developments offer the original allegations from Virginia Giuffre, of course, the subject of that infamous Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis. Again, the Prince has not been charged with any crimes, and he has denied all wrongdoing. But certainly, we've had not just the King, King Charles in the last week saying that, they would help, the Buckingham Palace would help with any police investigations. We've had the Prime Minister today, Keir Starmer, saying no one is above the law, although technically speaking, the King is above the law. He is the law. But in the last couple of moments, King Charles has said the law must take its course after expressing his deepest concern over the arrest of his brother on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Going to talk to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith in just a couple of moments. First up, let me introduce you to Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, and he's been joining me throughout the show. Rather less politics, rather more royals today. Just your reaction just first to that statement from the King, that expressing deepest concern and saying the law must take its course. I mean, to a certain extent, not quite sure what else he could have said in these circumstances.
Well, I mean, yeah, I suppose the alternative, the realistic alternative would be no statement. And it's good that he has come out ahead.
That kind of doesn't work with 24-hour news anymore,
no, of course
does
it doesn't. But I agree with you. I don't think there is an alternative answer. But you certainly can't imagine him being like, how dare they unhand my brother. It's not really the kind of thing that he was going to do. But again, I think this is sending another signal to any elements of the police or other which might have been wondering, nope, King's come down, public opinion's here.
Do you think a lot of this right now is there's been lots of question marks, monarchy and the establishment cover-ups and people thinking they're above the law, that actually a lot of this now is, and as one of our guests previously has said, former royal editor of The Sun, Charlie Ray, that actually this arrest, you think, or damaging for the royal family and the institution, but to a certain extent, actually, it's good for the royal family that he is seen to, he's not going to be protected, he's not above the law. And again, whether he's innocent or guilty of any crimes and he's denied any wrongdoing, that he must face the same investigation that anyone else would face if such evidence would emerge that there is the possibility of a crime having taken place.
I think I do agree with that. I mean, look, you and I both know the journalistic cliche, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up that really ends up doing for people, right? I think that if it obviously, it would be different if, as some people have alleged, King Charles knew about things and hid them. That would be a completely different matter.
And we've got some very senior figures who've said this.
Right, but if that doesn't get proven, then I think that what is important here is that Charles is seen by the public to cooperate fully with the pursuit of justice and to have treated fairly the information in front of him. If that's true, I suspect he can cauterise this. The royal family is a very resilient institution. It's had scandals before. And it will probably, almost certainly, being human, have scandals again. But I think that actually the King, so far, is playing this as well as he can.
It's very interesting, having just spoken to Lord Dannatt, a subject which was leading some of the front pages today. He certainly won't be leading the front page tomorrow. We know what's on the front page of every newspaper tomorrow. Maybe not the Guardian. They like to be a bit different, don't they? But they are Republicans largely, so maybe they will have it on the front page. But the story about the defence spending, and we spoke to Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army, talking about getting defence spending up to not just 3% at some point in the 30s, but to 5%, but starting the increase in spending now, money on the table, start procuring armaments, making sure we've got joined up thinking, things work, they are compatible alike. This combined with the Diego Garcia military base and the handing over of the Chagos Islands and leasing that back, defence is a growing issue in this country. But again, with all these things, there ain't any money, and any government who wants to spend more on defence, even though they talk about it, all parties, well, on the right and the Labour talk about it, all very well, but there isn't actually any money, and a lot of difficult decisions need to be taken.
I was going to say, I'd say that I've got three sort of quick observations about that. One, as you say, what are you cutting for this defence spending? Right, the markets will not wear a sustained increase in deficit financed revenue defence spending. Two, what are you buying with it? One of the problems that we have with the armed forces now is that we have cut military spending over and over again, but we have refused to shrink or refine the focus of our armed forces. Fundamentally, at this point, we can afford either a big European army or a globally capable navy, but not both. But we refuse to choose which one. Yeah. And third, which is interesting because Lord Dannatt mentioned this, currently we have a policy of exclusively buying British for defence, right? Yeah. Which sounds great, but it means that you've only got 3 companies and they can be rubbish because there's no one else to go to. Yeah. So it would be interesting to see if we did start buying overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Don't forget to get in touch. Lots of calls on the board. You're welcome to have your say. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll get to those in about the next 10-15 minutes. You can also text us 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Right, then, let's turn to my next guest, Ian Duncan-Smith, MP, former Conservative Party leader, remains a Conservative MP, and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Sir Ian.
Good afternoon, Julia.
I'm going to have to get your response, I'm afraid, to the news of Prince Andrew, as was Andrew Mountbatten's arrest this morning at the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, where he's now supposedly banished by the King over allegations of his relationships with Jeffrey Epstein and other allegations since. What do you make of this news?
Well, if we're clear, it's on a very specific charge. I'm not sure he's been charged yet.
No, he has not. We understand.
So that's important. Also, secondly, it's on abuse in a public office. That is to say, that did he or did he not pass sensitive information across to others, and that's the charge. It's not a charge related to the abuse of women. Yeah. And all the other main stuff which is going on at the moment. So we just want to be very clear what he's actually being arrested and investigated for specifically by the British, by that particular police force. I think, as everybody else has said, if there is an answer to be found on this, then we should find it. If it's a matter of prosecuting him as an individual citizen, the answer is he has to be. There's no question about it, if there is evidence. And the question is always, will there and is there enough evidence to say that there has been an offence committed? And therefore, that's why it's always difficult to speculate thereafter. I just simply say the court, it must take its course.
Yeah, well, you echo the words of the King. I must just read, if you don't mind, the full statement from the Buckingham Palace, his statement from King Charles of the arrest of his brother Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. He said, "I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and suspicion of misconduct in public office. What now follows is the full, fair and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. In this, as I have said before, they have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course. As this process continues, it would not be right for me to comment further on this matter. Meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all." Signed, Charles R. Your response to that full statement, Sir Ian?
Well, it's the right thing, I think, for the King to have done. I mean, the King must have an opinion on this and a view. The public would go, well, what's his view? And he's given his view. His view is that his brother is not above the law. And if there is evidence sufficient to charge, then it must take its course. What I did find a little bit intriguing was this morning, the Prime Minister, who must have known they're about to charge him, came suddenly out saying no one is above the law. And I found that, was that meant to be gaining him credibility for having said something positive ahead of the news? I must say, I found that.
I don't know whether, yes, I think he may have been asked that question. Maybe there'd been a tip-off. Who knows? But again, yeah, perhaps best for prime ministers to try and steer clear of these things. Let's talk about something that perhaps he would have been best to steer clear of a long time ago, and that's the Chagos Islands. And this is something that you have been campaigning on very vociferously. And we were told originally that we had to give away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius because for some reason there'd been this International Court of Justice decision, and we had some legal duty. That we know that's absolute nonsense. We know there's no moral duty. Mauritius has never owned the Chagos Islands. We've talked about this many times. There's been this big concern about not just giving away these Chagos Islands, but crucially leasing back the Diego Garcia military base used by both UK and US military for huge sums of money, some £35 billion of taxpayers' money in total. We were told by the Prime Minister he wouldn't go ahead with this if the White House, if America did not support it. And America initially did, the State Department did. Donald Trump did actually criticise it. Then he said he was supportive. And now he has said that he thinks it's a very bad idea. We should not give away the Chagos Islands and that Diego Garcia military base. Do you think we are going to or not? And has what Donald Trump said made any difference?
Well, I was in Washington a week and a half ago, and I talked to a lot of people involved in the process here. And what was interesting was, I think, they were, misled by certain issues not being raised. And for example, if you watch President Trump over the period of time since he got elected, he's been tentative about this because he's going on what the British government had assured him of and reassured him. And even people quote the last statement he made, in which he said it seems to be it's the best thing, the best deal.
Best deal they could get, yes.
But then he went on to say, if it doesn't work, we're going to take over the islands. Now, that doesn't sound to me like a man who's fully assured that this is the right thing to do. And of course, he's right to say tenancies and like this in countries do not work. Have a look at Hong Kong.
Exactly.
We had a full legal tenancy agreement in which we and the Chinese government had set out the limitations, etc. They trashed it arbitrarily, got rid of it, put their own law in place, and have been arresting people who were Hong Kong citizens, came under our control, and arresting them and torturing them, and Jimmy Lai is but a terrible...
Well, and also 100 years seems like a really long time, but it'll go by very quickly, and we'll still need that
and it wouldn't
base.
take them 2 minutes to say, terribly sorry, but we've decided we don't like the treaty, so what we're going to do is just take back the land that we say is ours. And Diego Garcia, well, you're not welcome here anymore. And all of that makes it very strange. And of course, you said earlier on, and this is the point I tried to make to colleagues in the USA, there is not a single legal problem here that makes us have to take this decision. So, for example, we are outside the ICJ, International Court of Justice, when it comes to Commonwealth matters. Full stop. Before we signed up to it, which I believe we shouldn't have done, but when we signed up to it, we had one exemption, not for Commonwealth matters, full stop. That means theirs was not a ruling, it was an advisory position. That's all they could do.
Why do you think this government is so hell-bent on this? Because we know, the Prime Minister's big mate, the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, another big human rights lawyer and friend of his, Philippe Sands, have been involved in this on behalf of the Mauritian government, and large sums of money may have been paid in fees on this. But there's no moral case, there's no legal case, there's no diplomatic case, there's no defence case. Why on earth is this sort of, the hill, or, the archipelago that Keir Starmer will die on for his premiership when no one else seems to think it's a good idea?
Well, because I think there are two problems here. First of all, the Gang of Three, who have worked together previously before Keir Starmer was a politician, and they were prosecuting British soldiers coming back from Afghanistan and Iran, working with that disgraced lawyer, Shiner. So their view about these things is they go for anybody and anything on the human rights issue. And the second bit of it, I think, which has infected quite a lot of our politics, is that we decide that any decision made by an external body, whether it's the Convention of Human Rights, the court, or whether it's the United Nations, is absolute. And we have to obey everything to do with it. This is bonkers, but it's infected the nature of this. And so I think this is what's gone on, plus the fact that, of course, Philippe Sands and others are going to stand to make quite a significant amount of money out of this, it has to be said. And we were about to pay taxpayer money of nearly 35 billion. So I say to taxpayers who may be watching this, did you get a vote on this?
Nope.
You asked about whether or not they can give away 35 billion. This is a government that's struggling to find any money for anything at the moment, including defence, but somehow they're okay to find 35 billion, not to buy something off somebody, but to give it to them when they hand over this stuff absolutely for nothing. I couldn't, just a bad deal. Trump is right about that, but it's also a wrong deal legally and in moral terms. What they should have done, and this is what they said all along, and I was opposed to this way back, even when the last government looked at this, I said, don't do it. And that's why Cameron said no. But the interesting thing about it really is when you look back through the whole of this, there was one thing that we needed to sort. The Chagosians had been moved off the islands in 1966. The right thing to do was to bring them back, let them have their homes again, give them some money, by the way, an awful lot less than the 35 billion to help out, and let them look after their domestic affairs. They want to be British citizens, and we would keep sovereignty. After all, Mauritius never had any
No,
direct...
exactly. It is just not
It's only because we set up an administration centre in Mauritius after we'd beaten the French and taken it over.
What do you make of the... I mean, people are just querying. I mean, it's just quite bizarre that these Chagosians, led by the island's elected First Minister, Misli Mandarin, they arrived on the archipelago. He arrived there with his father and two other islanders who'd vowed they won't leave. Within 24 hours, a British gunboat has turned up, patrol boat, and has basically said, right, you're off, we're going to arrest you, you're going to be thrown off the island. A lot of people are saying, how can we do that on the other side of the world in the Indian Ocean with people who arrive on an island we don't think should be there, although they've got perfect legal right to be there? When we can't do it with people who've arrived on the small boats across the Channel from France.
It shows you how absurd this government has become. Our priorities are not to defend our British citizens. They are to enforce a ridiculous position on some people that are on an island, by the way, who are Chagosians for the most part and have every right, you could argue, to be there. So the answer to that is, wind it up, will you, for God's sake. Just do a deal now which says to the Chagosians, you're welcome back. You're welcome back. You'll have to look after yourselves. We'll help you a bit with that. Your domestic affairs will be your own, but we'll remain sovereign and you'll remain British citizens. You know what? They'd love that. Not all of them will want to go back, but some will, and they should have a right to do that. And the Americans won't complain. They don't have any problem with that at all. Yep. The people that will complain are the Mauritians, who won't be paid £35 billion just for the pleasure of taking back land they never had in the first place.
And indicated, we didn't touch on in too much detail. Again, the key thing with Mauritius is that Mauritius are very much working hand in glove with the Chinese, who are a hostile state. One of the reasons why we need these bases. Let me also bring you on to, because this is a defence issue, and it's something you've spoken about an awful lot yourself. But we've had a letter to the government from numerous former defence chiefs and defence secretaries and the like. We spoke to Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army, in the last 20 minutes or so, basically saying that we need to be upping our defence spending. Actually, the defence, rather different from what Lord Dannatt actually said, or he signed the letter, very clear about it being by 5%, not 3% sometime in the 30s, but 5% within 10 years, and on core defence spending, doubling what it is right now. We're looking at going from around the 60 billion mark to around the 120 billion mark. Do you endorse that? They're saying it's a 1936 moment that we're in right now. We need to spend the money now, or we'll have to spend a heck of a lot more in the future.
I have said for some time now, and often been ignored, but I'm happy to carry on saying it, that we are now living in the most dangerous times that we ever did since the Second World War. Not since the ending of the Soviet Union, but the Second World War. The reason is we have been caught completely napping on this one. The totalitarian states of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran are rising hard, and they work together. They're massively increasing their potency. China will overtake the US in naval vessels in about a year and a half to 2 years. Threats to Taiwan going on, threats to the east-west trade routes, another reason why we need to stay in Diego Garcia and in control of it. All of this is going on right in front of us, and the invasion of Ukraine with the brutality that's taking place. And Russia couldn't do it unless China had financed them for that, completely top to bottom. And all the others have helped them. So that is what we're dealing with, and it's growing. Instead of which, Trump was right about this. Europe has done absolutely nothing for so long, getting away with American spending and not UK and European spending. We have to reverse that. That's beginning to happen. But, 2.5% to 3% is not going to cut it. They are right. when Margaret Thatcher, with Ronald Reagan and Chancellor Helmut Kohl, stood firm and put defense spending up to 5% of GDP, we saw off the Soviet Union, and they collapsed directly as a result of being unable to keep up with us. That is the only way we will deal with these countries, to show them strength. And the problem is the government now is in a complete tizzy. They have no idea what they're doing. By the way, you know this 35 billion that I spoke about with Chagos? We were absolutely certain they wouldn't tell us, but it was going to come out of the defense.
Yeah. The fact that they wouldn't clarify that it wouldn't was part of the giveaway. And again, that 35 billion is over 100 years, but it's very much front-loaded right now.
All going to come out
so
of
Ian, we'll have to leave it there. We've covered an awful lot of ground. It does sound like you've been rather influential in Washington. Keep up the work, sir. So Ian Douglas-Smith, former Conservative Party leader, thank you very much indeed. Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, listening to that. It does sound like Ian Douglas-Smith, you know, as he says, he thinks that actually when it comes to the Diego Garcia base, that actually perhaps there's been a little bit of misleading of Washington, D.C. on that issue.
I can certainly believe that there's been a lot of misleading of Trump, because again, the State Department very often had a conflicting set of priorities, even with regards to Britain. Back during the Falklands War, the State Department took a slightly different view about whether or not Ronald Reagan should come riding to Margaret Thatcher's aid than other elements of the government. But it is incredible, because not only is there not a human rights case for handing over the islands, but actually, do you know who has got a track record of abusing the human rights of Mauritians? Of the Chagosians? Mauritius.
Ta-da!
It actually treats them incredibly badly. That's one of the reasons the Chagosians are so rightly concerned about their home being handed over to Mauritians.
Absolutely.
So you've got all of these human rights lawyers who are actually colluding with the party that is performing human rights abuses.
Because again, they talk a good game, but we just know it's all absolute utter nonsense. I'm just going to go back to the royal story. Obviously, leading the news today, Prince Andrew's, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's arrest by Thames Valley Police at his home on the Sandringham estate. The King, in the last 20 minutes or so, has issued a formal statement from Buckingham Palace after the arrest of his own brother, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Here is the statement in full. I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and suspicion of misconduct in public office, the King has said. What now follows is the full, fair and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. In this, as I've said before, they have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. The King continues, let me state clearly, the law must take its course. As this process continues, it would not be right for me to comment further on this matter. Meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all. Love to hear your reactions to all of that. Do get in touch. Lots of calls on the board, 0344 499 1000. We'll get to your calls up next. This is Talk.
And it's not beyond the wit of man, is it, Peter, to assume that Britain's most populous city might contain a couple of grooming gangs?
Of course, it was blatantly obvious to anybody involved in investigative journalism, law enforcement and more. If we just move on to the lamentable Sadiq Khan for a moment, what he has proven here is that he is, number one, either a liar, or number two, he is ignorant of the blatantly obvious.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:26 is the time. I just read you that statement from the King in relation to the arrest of his brother Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, where he has said that he has expressed deepest concern and says the law must take its course and the issue is investigated in the appropriate manner by the appropriate authorities. We just had a statement from the family of Virginia Giuffre. Of course, she is the woman who claims and has alleged that she was trafficked to have sex with Prince Andrew, as he then was, both in London and elsewhere when she was 17 years old. And the family, she's now sadly dead, but the family has issued a statement saying, today our broken hearts have been lifted at the news that no one is above the law, not even royalty. On behalf of our sister Virginia Roberts Giuffre, we extend our gratitude to the UK's Thames Valley Police for their investigation and arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. He was never a prince, for survivors everywhere. Virginia did this for you. And that's from Sky and Amanda Roberts and Danny and Lynette Wilson. Very interesting statement there. Let's get to your calls right now. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Just approaching 12:28. Let's go to James, who is in Devon. Hello, James. What do you want to say?
Yeah, hi, Julia. Reference the King's message. I just feel like going yawn. You're speaking to us like we live on the moon. You're fully aware what Thames Valley Police was going to do because you're the King. Yeah.
You think the royal family would have been informed in advance?
God, of course they would have. He speaks to us like we live on the moon. And reference Mountbatten-Windsor. Why isn't Mandy Mandelson in custody with the Metropolitan Police? We've got emails.
Well, again, that's an ongoing investigation. I have to. Sorry to talk over you. That is an ongoing investigation, and again, Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, has denied any wrongdoing as well. But again, we know that investigation is going forward.
Yeah, I know that, Julia. But we've got the same emails that were based. I've got Andrew Mountbatten.
There seems to be remarkably similar in terms of information being passed, and one by alleged by a then business secretary, a minister of the Crown, and one by the UK trade envoy working for his own mother's government at the time.
Absolutely right, but the one hasn't got any friends left, and the other one seems that there is still friends left. There we go, Julia.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, people have been dropping Andrew like the proverbial hot potato. But we've still had people. We've had people even very recently defending Peter Mandelson and but wasn't he good and wasn't he the right person to be appointed as ambassador? Even though of course he was still best mates, best pals. He called himself with Jeffrey Epstein. Do you think this has damaged the royal family, or do you think this is just damaging for Andrew?
It's damaging to the whole basically establishment. We've got what's going on with the royal family. We've got the King pretending that he doesn't know what's going on. Yes, you do know what's going on, sir. Yes, you do. We've got what's going on with the government, but it just seems that one of them still got his title. So we got Lord Mandelson, still Lord Mandelson. Yeah. We've got Andrew stripped of his title. So we know where the friends still lie. They still lie with Mandy Mandelson.
I think, again, it's because that Act of Parliament to strip the peerages, isn't it? I have to say, I've got pretty much no time for any of these titles anyway. I use them as a courtesy to people who feel strongly about them. I don't hold much by them. But thank you, James. Appreciate that call. Very cynical, not happy at all. Tracy is on the line in Northampton. Tracy, you want to have your say. What do you want to tell us?
Absolutely. Good morning.
Afternoon.
Love the show. Waking up this morning and hearing all what I'm hearing, I am disgusted what they're doing to Andrew. I am, truly am. To me, he's always be a prince and a Prince Andrew. And how his family has treated him like they just threw stones.
Hold on a minute. This is throwing me. You're saying it's outrageous he's been arrested?
Yes, I do. Because if the Queen was alive, God bless her heart, and I grew up with the Queen, we all know Andrew was her favourite son, and we all know she tried to help him, okay? And if I would think she's turning in her grave today. And I think Prince Charles and the rest of the consumption, they all knew.
and they just.
You think the Queen didn't? You know, when the late Queen Elizabeth provided 10 million quid of the payoff to Virginia Giuffre.
I do think she does, but it's her child. It's your children.
Well, that's no, and we know about parents with their sons and their daughters, and especially a mum with her favourite son. But Tracy,
humiliated like this is wrong. They've already banished him into Norfolk to here, there.
Have you seen the size of the house? It's not. I mean, I don't think it's what most people consider banishment. I mean, he's still in the country. Can I just stop you, Tracy? I'm utterly perplexed, and we want to hear all views on here. You are disgusted that a man who is facing a serious 9 different police forces looking into his activities, some very serious allegations about wrongdoing with women, some very serious allegations about wrongdoing in terms of misconduct in public office. But why? Because he's a prince and because he's the son of the late Queen and the brother of the current king. Why should he be above the law? Because anyone else accused of such things would face an investigation by the police, would they not?
Yeah, but he hasn't faced allegations about sexual and all stuff like that at the moment.
No, he has. No. Well, they're being looked into by the police. We know that.
They're into. But, Julia, what I'm trying to say, it was wrong. I agree, it was wrong if it is true.
Well, he's denied anything.
I'm sorry, but I'm on his side.
I don't know. I don't understand. If we've got these black and white documents, we've got emails from the Epstein files, which purport to show, if they are genuine, that information that was given to Andrew because of his role as a UK trade envoy in confidence to help negotiate things on behalf of the British government and business, that information was given. Again, he's denied this, but if that information was given to his paedophile mate Jeffrey Epstein, which he could have then used as either evidence, used as ways to make money or to pass to whoever, was it Russia, was it China, whoever he was working for, then the information which undoubtedly anyone who was given in that context would know was confidential and not to be passed on. If he did do that, and that's what it appears he's been arrested for, if he did do that, should he not face a police investigation?
Or everybody, the king, the family, are throwing stones at him already.
Well, they haven't. The king has said he's not commenting. He says there'll be a full, fair and proper process.
This morning saying that he is concerned or deeply concerned or whatever.
Deepest concern.
Yeah,
wouldn't you be concerned if your brother was arrested?
Of course. Do you know what? If I was the king, I would be there to support him, no matter what anybody's done. That's his brother.
So wait, can I clarify? If a member of your family, was murdered, so I'm not saying no one's accusing Andrew of murder. If a member of your family, I don't know, embezzled or murdered someone or stole or raped somebody, now one could be supportive and say, I don't believe they would have done that. I don't believe. I know this person. I love them. I don't believe they'd have done that.
Your children.
And you would support them. Yeah. If there was, and I'm not saying there is in Prince Andrew's case, but if there were incontrovertible evidence that they had done it, even if they said to you, I did it, Mum, or I did it, sister, would you still stand by them?
No, not if they admitted it. If they admitted it to me, then I would say, you've got to do the right thing.
So the king should stand by. The king should stand by Andrew, no matter what, if he says he's not done anything wrong.
The king knew. I think they all knew what was going on, and they threw stones. This has been going on for months and months about Prince Andrew.
Well, hold on a minute. If they all knew and nothing's happened all the years, then they have been protecting him.
Yeah, they have been protecting him, but now it's been arrested. Don't you think they ought to come out and sort of be with him?
Well, I don't think they can be with him. He's in police custody right now.
Well, he's the king. Send someone, send a barrister,
I'm pretty sure that Andrew's got legal advice. I mean, if he hasn't, then they've got some big worries. I can't be honest with you, Tracy. I'm not often, lost words, I'm absolutely flabbergasted by your view on that. But always good to get different views on the show. Thank you very much indeed. Henry Hill listening to that from Conservative Home. Wow.
Yeah, I think it does highlight maybe something tricky about the King's position, certainly early on, right? Which is that naturally, I don't think any, or at least many of your viewers want the King to circle the wagons and call for the Royal Guard and try and get Andrew off the hook, given the weight of the seriousness of the inquiry. But on the other hand, if it had been the case that at the first sign of trouble, at the first sign of a PR problem for the monarchy, the king had cut his brother off completely and thrown him to the wolves, we also wouldn't like that, right? And that wouldn't say good things.
So he's been walking a sort of...
Yeah, because I think we would all expect, in the first instance, you to stand up for your brother, right? And so I think that is one of the really difficult things about
Was he standing up for Andrew, or was he making it go away?
Well, I mean, again, you also have your duty to the institution of the monarchy, and also it is important to stress that the fact that they made the payoff, especially, it does not mean that they thought they'd lose. It would simply often it is simply a PR exercise, right? Which is we think we might win this case, and remember some of the other allegations,
which is the most damaging. In
Jeffrey's book, yeah, exactly. And I think that's worth pointing out.
Very fair point, Henry. Thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break, then we are going to be talking to the former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth, Dickie Arbiter, about this extraordinary news story that Andrew, the brother of the King, has been arrested on accusations of misconduct in public office. That's up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:39 is the time. Let's talk more about this extraordinary story of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor being arrested by Thames Valley Police, currently in custody over allegations of misconduct in public office. These, of course, revelations in the Epstein files. He, of course, has denied any wrongdoing. Let's talk to Dickie Arbiter now, former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth and former royal journalist too. A very good afternoon to you, Dickie.
Hello, Julia.
Well, we've spoken a lot in the last few weeks, in particular as these Epstein files, these revelations have exploded in everyone's face, not least the royal family's face, and indeed the government's face. We've seen, resignations in number 10 and goodness knows what. We've seen the banishment of Andrew to the Sandringham estate, but of course this is where the police found him in Norfolk. We know that Thames Valley Police have arrived in various undisclosed police vehicles, and arrests has been made. He is currently in custody, and searches are being made of his home on the Sandringham estate, and indeed in Berkshire, in Windsor as well. What's your first reaction to this news from about 3 hours ago? What was your first reaction when you heard?
My first reaction was how swiftly the Thames Valley Police moved, because it was only at the end of last week that they were talking about assessing, and here we are on Thursday, barely a week later, when they've actually trundled all the way up to Sandringham with a fleet of cars to arrest him, to take him to custody, to question him. So they've moved very quickly. They understand the seriousness of the allegations, and they want to get to the bottom of it as quickly as possible. And if there's a case to answer, they'll push it forward to the CPS, who in turn will set a court hearing date. and it'll be for the legal system to judge whether he is guilty or not guilty.
I mean, this is the thing, as the King has said, he stressed his deepest concern, but says the law must take its course. And it's interesting that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has said earlier today, no one is above the law. I mean, technically, actually, the King is above the law, but certainly not his brother. But do you think that, I mean, have the police acted quickly now because of this avalanche of information that's come out of the Epstein files, and the public outcry, the political outcry, and the pressure on not just Andrew, but also the pressure on the King, and big questions being asked about what your former boss, the late Queen Elizabeth, knew and when about allegations, Virginia Giuffre and other allegations, but what they would have known a long time ago, and their contribution towards the payoff for that civil case from Virginia Giuffre, and their reasons for doing that. And the pressure has now been mounting on the royal family as an institution and on the King himself, and that this has perhaps gone from an establishment cover-up, as many of us have suspected, to the establishment basically, taking action to protect themselves. Do you see it like that, or is that a bit too much of a conspiracy theory?
I think there's too much of an element of a conspiracy theory there. Let me rewind the clock slightly. You mentioned the late Queen. She was a terrific monarch, but she wasn't a very good mother. I'm not saying she didn't love her children, but she tended to bury her head in the sand when it came to their misdeeds. She just didn't want to know. And quite often, not quite often, all the time, Andrew would never appraise her of what he was doing or what he was not doing. When it was official, she knew what he was doing, but when he was not on the official road, then she didn't know. And if there were questions and she'd asked, he'd often lie. I mean, go back to 2019 and that Newsnight interview. He probably told her he was doing a television interview. Certainly wouldn't have told her what the content matter is, because the alarm bells would have rung and she would have got somebody to stop it. So she wasn't very good on that score. As far as conspiracies are concerned, no, there's no conspiracy. People saying, well, why hasn't Charles come out sooner? It's all very well saying that, but you can only come out and say things when there is actually something to say.
No, exactly.
With the release of those Epstein files, there certainly was something to say, and he was very quick to say it. Today, he's also been very quick to say that the law must proceed on due process. There are various callers. I've been talking to other stations where callers have said, well, the King knew all about it. No, he didn't know all about it. One of the things the police do not do is inform the family that they're going to arrest one of their loved ones, because what they don't want is the loved one to get rid of stuff that the police might be looking for.
One of our callers has also just suggested that the King would have known in advance that this would have...
No, he didn't know in advance. He would have known probably when the cars were actually arriving in Sandringham, by which time it would have been too late to alert his brother, and he wouldn't have alerted his brother anyway, because one of the things that the King is, he does follow the due process of the law. And if he says he's going to, the due process of the law must act accordingly, he means that. He's not saying it as a means of window dressing the monarchy.
He understands the significance of this. Well, look, lots of people, we've spoken to you about this recently. We've spoken to Di Davies, we've spoken to Andrew Lowney, the royal author, and there are an awful lot of people who are saying this is a very, very, very dangerous, precipitous moment for the royal family as an institution, for the monarchy, for the King himself, as well as for Andrew. Now, no one is accusing anyone else in the royal family of any wrongdoing in relation to misconduct in public office or of any misdeeds in relation to any young women or girls who were trafficked by Andrew Epstein. Now, this, of course, only the arrest we've seen, it only relates to those allegations of misconduct in public office, nothing to do with any of those other allegations. But there has been lots of people talking about how, this is a dangerous moment for the monarchy. Will we see a circling of the wagons to sort of go, right, Andrew, we've already seen, no HRH, no title, you're out, go away quietly. You're too much damage. We've seen the statement from the King. We've got the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate. We are, according to the Press Association, have said that they support the King's statement, and I think why wouldn't they? But is this now damage limitation?
Damage limitation. People are saying that the monarchy won't last, that it's damaging to the monarchy. Yeah. The monarchy as an institution is strong.
Yeah.
It's the individuals. No one individual is the monarchy.
Yep.
And no one individual can bring the monarchy down. Go back to 1936, and people thought, well, Edward VIII is abdicating, that's the end of the monarchy. It wasn't the end of the monarchy. Think in a slightly different way to 1992, during the Annus Horribilis. People thought at the time, well, you know, that's the end of the monarchy. It wasn't the end of the monarchy. The monarchy will survive. And there's no circling of the wagons, because if you're circling the wagons, you're circling to protect your own.
Yeah.
Your own is actually in police custody.
That's a very good point. And it is important to stress, and I've tried to make sure I've stressed it very, 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 very boringly often in the last few hours, that we do need to stress that, you know, no charges have been brought and that people are innocent until proven guilty, if there were charges brought, and that Andrew has denied any wrongdoing. We would all expect the same treatment if this was happening to us. But I mean, you say, you know, okay, this isn't about damage control. This, you know, the monarchy as an institution survives. There have been some saying that if there were evidence that the king, when he was Prince Charles, was aware of Andrew's misdeeds, that it could actually get to a point where the outcry from the public, if there were misdeeds, I must stress, the outcry from the public would be such that he would be forced to abdicate. And remember, many, many years after the divorce with Diana, and certainly after her death, lots of talk about how the crown should pass a generation and go straight to Prince William, a much more popular figure. Do you think there's any possibility of that happening?
I don't think there is any possibility of that happening. Let's sort of look at the royal family. Unlike you or I and our families, they're not like that. They don't live in each other's pockets. They don't entertain each other in each other's homes. The only time they really come together is at Christmas or at Easter, a church service at Windsor Castle, St George's Chapel. They're not sociable animals amongst each other. They've got their own circle of friends. So in terms of circling the wagons, no, it's not going to happen. Protecting their own, Andrew has committed a misdeed, alleged that he's committed a misdeed. He's on his own.
Yeah.
The royal family will continue with what it's supposed to be doing and what it is doing today. Charles is out on an engagement this afternoon. No doubt there'll be hecklers. The Queen is on an engagement. What's the time now? It's 10 to 1. She'll be on an engagement at 1 o'clock. There'll no doubt be hecklers there. They'll survive that.
Okay,
and they'll carry on. You know, it's easy and flippant for me to say they'll carry on as normal. The problem is in police custody.
Dickie Arbiter, former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth, thank you so much. Very quick response from Henry Hill to what Dickie Arbiter had to say.
I mean, I largely agree. I think I agree with him. The monarchy, it often has moments of crisis, but it does tend to come through them because whatever the outlying elements of the royal family do, the absolute core, that pillar of the succession, which is absolutely essential, they have so far managed to remain above it.
Yeah, yes, indeed. It's going to be very fascinating. Look, we've got another story to talk about coming up. Do stay tuned. 12:49 is the time. This is Talk.
Why have the progressive left ignored these Black Islanders?
Because they are the wrong kind of Black Islanders. They're very loyal to the crown. You know, Misley, as you showed, I think on your programme yesterday, lands on the islands and says, "God save the king." I mean, that I think just triggers a few of these human rights lawyer types. It fills them with ideas of imperial domination and all that. I mean, the reality is the only places still under the British Crown are the places that did not want to be pushed out.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:51 is the time. Obviously, we're going to keep you up to date with the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor throughout the day. Peter Cardwell in for Ian Collins coming up in just a few moments. Henry Hill's still with me, but I just want to touch on another story. A major story today. Well, certainly was until Andrew's arrest, but special educational needs and disability support, that SEND support in England, is facing its biggest shake-up in a generation, potentially provoking a political backlash from Labour backbenchers. Doesn't everything that Keir Starmer tries to do. But a leaked document suggests reforms that would see a complete system redesign and would actually see all children going from primary school to secondary school basically being reassessed for their needs. We know we've got a massively ballooning cost of the number of children who are getting the extra help. In England, there are around 482,000 school children with what are called these sort of educational extra help, ECHPs, which set out their individual legal rights to support. Well, let's talk about this with Chris McGovern, who's chairman of the Campaign for Real Education and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Chris.
Hi there, Julie.
Thanks for joining us. Sorry we've not got much time. You can understand on a very busy news day, but this affects an awful lot of families, but actually affects an awful lot of, well, millions of the families of kids who are in school who are not SEND, who are not getting that extra help, because, of course, a lot of school resources and taxation goes to help those children, the tax season like. We are seeing absolute ballooning cost of that. What do you make of what has been leaked of what the government plans to do?
Well, what's happening clearly is that too many children are being diagnosed with special educational needs. It's massive over-diagnosis. Now, that's not to say that children who've got genuine needs shouldn't be supported. They should. But we've got a situation now where it's in middle-class areas, affluent areas of the country, where more and more children, the most children, are actually being diagnosed with special educational needs. There's also quite wide variations across the UK in terms of the numbers of children. Yeah. But if you're a middle-class parent, you know how things work. You know that if you are diagnosed with special educational needs, you get more time, for example, in exams, in public exams. There are advantages. Now, in total, there are 20% of children diagnosed with special educational needs. There are 5% who have got a legal right to support. 20% is ludicrous. It's higher than the rest of Europe, higher than the rest of the world. And there's overspend here. So we need to focus the resources more thinly, more directly on those who really need
rather than
support.
spreading them. And this is the same, isn't it? It's like disability benefits and things and help for people in adulthood. Whereas if you are spreading it so thinly, and if everybody's got a special need of some sort, then no one does. And again, basically medicalising what is on the normal spectrum. I remember certainly, there's private schools in North London where the kids are academically selected. They're all straight A graders, but apparently a third of them have special educational needs and need an extra hour for each A-level exam. I mean, come on. We used to just call that as something very simple. We used to call it cheating. But this is the thing. If it is the case that, again, it's often middle-class parents who can afford to spend what can often be thousands of pounds to get a psychologist or educational specialist to say that their child has those needs, it opens up a whole range of help for their child and gives them an advantage.
Yeah, and there's another key point here, Julia. We need to define what we mean by special educational needs. Now, Richard Branson, for example, and Elon Musk have talked about autism and ADHD, but we wouldn't really think they've got a real problem, would we? Yeah. So we've got to look at the situation. And I think actually we're missing something here, because the children we most depend on for the future are the brightest, the gifted and the talented. They're never included as special educational needs. And yet the future of this country depends on the most able succeeding and being supported. So they should also be included within the numbers of special educational needs, because everything depends on them.
Well, one of them is more likely to cure cancer or create a new safe, clean energy and the like. I mean, this is the thing. And then a lot of the people who are very worried about this couldn't care less about grammar schools or focused education for the brightest. Of course, we always worry it's your average kid who ends up missing out. But again, a lot of people who looked into this said there are a lot of kids, especially from families where they are really desperate, but they haven't got the resources, they haven't got the sharp elbows, who are missing out on help they really, really need. And then there are many, many children who don't really need it, but are just average kids of parents who think, I don't want an average child. There must be something wrong with them. I'll give them a label and I'll get that extra help. And they are getting that help. And the fact that it's different in different areas by a big way and different parts of the country suggests there is something else happening here other than genuine need in many cases. But at the same time, we'll all know families who are desperate to get their child help, and the child really does need help, and they're not getting it.
Yeah, well, we're spreading the resources too thin, and it's really hard on the genuine cases.
Yeah.
So we've got to stop the sharp-elbowed middle-class parents from taking this over. So in a way, you know, the government, I don't often support the government, but actually they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
They're trying to tighten up on this. I mean, simply can't afford it anyway. It's unaffordable. Yeah. Most county councils are actually bankrupt, but they don't include their support for these children on their accounts. So look, one child reported in the national press was costing £950 per day just to take them to school.
Yeah.
£950.
It's absurd. I mean, that's absurd. And we know that specialist schools can often be a long distance, but that's just abject nonsense, is it not? Really good to talk to you. Chris McGovern, Chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, thank you very much indeed for that. Henry Hill, this is a big issue, but we know the biggest issue changing anything on this is going to be the parents of the genuine children with the special needs who will be all over this, as will many of the journalists who've also got children in that situation. And the backbenchers on the Labour benches, they are going to say, absolutely not, this is outrageous. I didn't come into Westminster to take away care from the genuinely needy kids. That's how it's going to work out.
I mean, I think this is going to backfire anyway, because there's not much detail, but in the version of this that I've got, it says that this plan is going to be accompanied by an expansion of legal rights. And here's the thing, the policy about retesting, that can go tomorrow. Legal rights, they stick. Yeah,
absolutely. And every child will continue to have those legal rights. And again, I think one of the biggest issues is the taxis. I mean, billions spent on these taxis. It's quite absurd, isn't it? Henry, it's been a pleasure having your company. I think we were talking about a subject that was rather different from what we expected. I said a few moments ago I was expecting Peter Carball to walk in, but Ian Collins is back. Hello.
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 Oh, sorry, what sort of word was that?
I don't know what happened then. I think...
It's a new language. Well, I came back from Bulgaria, you see, last night.
And you thought you'd pop in?
Just a
Did you think it'd be a nice quiet news day? Nothing going on?
I thought it'll be nice and quiet when I get back. Everything will be fine. And then, of course, a senior royal, or former senior royal, gets himself arrested. I bet he thought it's his birthday today, isn't it?
66. I mean, what a birthday.
I mean, when he opened the front door and he saw a female police officer with handcuffs, he probably thought, hey, happy days. He thought, well, maybe one of the brothers has put on one of those, grams for me. Clearly that didn't happen, and now he's sitting in a police cell somewhere.
He is. It's just been confirmed. He is remaining in police custody. Yes, he wouldn't have expected it to be dealt with that quickly, knowing how...
I guess he would have known the night before, probably.
Well, apparently not. I mean, that's the question. Well, are people advised in advance of these things or not? But certainly it was a surprise to...
known, I think.
Well, this is it. Would this have been something that would have gone through...
Yeah.
The authorities, like, look, just FYI, this is going to happen. A lot of people say, this has actually moved very quickly for the police. But of course, this is on the issue